Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live stream and Q&A. We're going to talk about all the latest in the world of Star Wars news, as well as take your guys' questions, comments, theories, anything you'd like to discuss in the world of Star Wars or any other topic, mostly sticking within the worlds of pop culture and movies and that type of thing, but anything you'd like to discuss from the worlds of comics, movies, video games, sports, anything you'd like to discuss, send it into the chat and we will be happy to answer it. Of course, as always, this is a stream powered by your guys' chats, and because it is powered by your guys' chats, it does come with a lot of different chats in the chat room. So if you want to guarantee you get a chat on tonight's stream, make sure you send in a super chat. Helps out our channel and it bumps you up to the top. The other way to do so is to join our Patreon or YouTube membership programs, where if you are of a certain tier, you will get priority chat access both in the chat on YouTube memberships and then on the post when we post it every single time a new stream comes out on the Patreon page. So check out those two programs as well. We're going to run down some interesting topics here as we're ramping up to Star Wars Celebration. News is a little bit few and further between, but we did have some leaks as pertaining to Star Wars Celebration, including some of the big novel announcements that hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about at the actual event. We do have a couple new leaks of new novels that are going to be coming out, as well as reprints for both Revenge of the Sith and all of the original trilogy novelizations. They're coming with new covers and all of that for anniversary editions. It's going to be really cool. I'm glad they're giving some credence to the old novelizations, which have kind of been completely ignored under Disney because they haven't really known whether they're going to do their own novelizations of the movies for canon or not. So we're going to talk about that, as well as some new details on the path of the lightsaber manga, as well as a few other stories like the announcement of a new mixed reality pod racing game coming to MetaQuest, featuring or called Beyond Victory, and featuring a new comic tie-in that is going to be exclusive to Star Wars Celebration. I'm sure it'll come out eventually, at least digitally, but you can get a physical copy at Star Wars Celebration if you are going, if you test out the experience there. So let's get into our first story here, and it is going to start with the novel announcements. So this was taken from I believe, the website of Random House, Penguin Random House, who does publish Star Wars. People were scrolling through, as I guess people do, just looking at their website, and found that they had postings for two new Star Wars books that are going to be coming out. One specifically that really excites me. It's called Master of Evil, and it is going to be supposedly a dark side centered story. We don't really know anything about it other than it is coming out November 11th. So it should be our last book of the year. That's usually Del Rey. They usually do one type of book in either October or November, kind of closes out the year. And with no High Republic this year, I would imagine that's our last book of the year. But we're looking at possibly getting this book as our final book of the year. Master of Evil is another Force centric tale, probably related to the dark side. It does. A lot of people have compared it to that line from A New Hope, where Obi-Wan says, "Only a Master of Evil, doth," when they're fighting. So could be about Darth Vader. It would be really cool to get a novel from the Darth Vader perspective as we celebrate 20 years, 25 years of Revenge of the Sith. No, 20 years of Revenge of the Sith. And then we're also getting a tie-in book to The Force Awakens for its 10th anniversary as well. According to Edelweiss, there's a listing for a new young adult novel coming in September to celebrate this anniversary of The Force Awakens, which has kind of been a weird one. We were talking about it because when Oscar Isaac signed up to be at Celebration, we kind of figured, okay, they're going to have everybody there. John Boyega, Daisy Ridley, everybody. They're going to have a huge celebration for the anniversary of The Force Awakens. And then nobody else really signed up for Star Wars Celebration. And Force Awakens has yet to get its re-release announcement. Now, I've speculated on this channel many times that that's because it was a December release. So we're probably going to get a December or late fall re-release for Force Awakens instead of, and let Revenge of the Sith, because it was a May release, have that spring re-release time that's worked so well for Return of the Jedi and the Phantom Menace. So I assume that's what we're going to get. But the fact that it is the 10th anniversary of The Force Awakens makes me feel old. It also is just kind of crazy when thinking about it, because it feels like the sequels are still relatively, new amongst Star Wars mythology. And To have this be 10 years, like, this is as old as Revenge of the Sith was when we saw Force Awakens for the first time, which is just it's kind of mind-boggling, but I'm glad they're doing something that's going to help tie in and bring The Force Awakens back. I still really enjoy The Force Awakens, my favorite sequel movie, so I'm glad it's getting a little bit of love. But yeah, got some new announcements now to fill out that post High Republic wave of Star Wars books that is going to be finishing off the year. We were wondering what that's going to be. It seems like it's going to wrap up with the Bad Batch and then the Force Awakens tie-in, and then Master of Evil. Sanak, what are your thoughts on these two new books being revealed?
I'm glad. I was a little worried that with this kind of being the start of a new era of Star Wars that included books, I think books have always had kind of the fortune of, not necessarily having to be tied down by changes in initiatives, publishers, direction of Star Wars in general. They've always been like, all right, so here's another series, figure out how to connect it to that or ignore elements of that. It's always been a little messy in the EU, that's without a doubt. It's a little messy in canon, not as much because they aren't as grand stories, obviously, huge initiatives where, like, everything is continuing like the original trilogy characters, but more than anything, I was like, "Okay, well, if we're moving into this new age, are they gonna take a whole period off where they're gonna focus on, okay, take a couple months, maybe a year to develop these ideas, and then in 2026, obviously with Mandalorian and Grogu, let's get a huge push, have publishing kinda lift up everything with animation, everything with obviously a movie being back in theaters, etcetera." So I thought maybe they just hold off, kinda let the High Republic kinda coast for the rest of the year, let people catch up and all that. And that's not a terrible thing, but I've always liked that publishing never stops. It always continues, it always stretches out, it always connects. So hearing this, pretty great. I mean, Master of Evil, right? I believe, like you said, Adam Christopher. He's already kind of proven himself immediately. We were all really excited when we saw him at Anaheim 22, and just that being his first Star Wars book, Shadow of the Sith, was phenomenal, right? Like he really understood the dark side. I know you're a much bigger dark side novel reader than I have been, and I'm trying to rectify that slowly. But he's for you, it was already very impressive. For me, I was just like, wow, he nailed everything I wanted. He's got enough of that sequel look that I did like the qualities that were there, blended in with kind of the grandmaster look that we expected that we saw in more the calmer moments of the EU before it's like, okay, he's just basically a 60-year-old man cosplaying as 20 and fighting and showing off incredible powers. Force God, right? I like the characterizations more than anything. He nailed those in the books, and
Mhm.
that's one thing that's kind of been lacking in the current canon. They'll either be super character focused on one or two characters in like a whole new original cast, or they'll be like, here's like a general story with big plot beats like Aftermath, which are like, that's great, that's big, that's expansive. But is that really developing these characters and following through with them again and again? And like we still haven't seen that original crew and show up really since those novels. So we haven't gotten a Lost Star sequel. That's probably the closest thing that felt very EU to me that still was connected to huge events and stuff. It's always been either like focused heavily in on like an origin story or go big and grand, but not super detailed, right? So what I saw from Shadow Sith made me excited. I hope Master of Evil is the same. I know a lot of people are thinking, obviously that quote, like you said, that Obi-Wan says, feels like it's very referential to Darth Vader, and it very much could be. And I'm hoping that, frankly, they almost do like a quasi sequel to Shadow of the Sith. Instead, now we follow Anakin and his journey, maybe some stuff before, some stuff during. He's a character that, while I do want a lot of live action and animation to highlight like why he doesn't communicate with Ben, why he seemingly is on his own journey and like what's going on, and I'm sure the Ahsoka series will at least begin laying solid foundation for that. I kinda wanna get into the headspace of the character that's hurting in Shadow of the Sith. The Force Ghost should always be at peace, transcends reality, right? They're not bound by space and time like everybody else. But yet, here in this vision that he sees on Exegol with Luke, and he takes off the Wraiths, he beats them down, and then he's trying to talk to Luke, and he's just like, in pain. It doesn't make sense, right? It's like this is not what we know about Force Ghosts. So I'd love to see that kind of explored. That's kind of what I'd like for the book. If it's just a Darth Vader novel, not bad. But maybe continue it off of like where we left off with Tarkin, which is a very early canon book, but there's a lot of good stuff there for that character, and you could bring in Vader into a time period that has been fleshed out a little bit, definitely with the Charles Soule line, but still has space, as we've seen with the Obi-Wan Kenobi show and all that, to keep him doing these enforcer things, get into his mind. I am very curious though, like if this would be like a Dark Lord of the Sith, like if we really do mind him, I feel like as much as we have in comics and everything, there is a little bit of separation. There isn't really that transition from Anakin to Obi-Wan. They've never really dealt with that. So if we are doing a book like that, is it gonna adapt some of the Charles Soule stuff? Is that gonna be like the immediate like day or two after? Like there's really not much time. So there's a lot. Maybe it could just be like his whole story, like throughout the period of time from Revenge of the Sith all the way to where we see him or hear him again in Rise of Skywalker. Maybe it is everything that we are, at least maybe until Return of the Jedi, right? If we can capture all that, that'd be pretty interesting too. But frankly, I just want a new original story. If it includes Vader, awesome. If it's someone else, if it's referring to a new Darksider, that'd be cool too. Like, I wouldn't mind if they just kind of try a solo story, and then it's like, oh, that worked pretty cool, and let's keep building that work, keep building out that time period, that part of the galaxy. I don't think it would hurt. But whatever Adam Christopher does, I'm definitely seated, even more so than I was for Shadow of the Sith. Now that I've seen the proof in the pudding, like now I'm like I'm not gonna wait. Like I'm there.
Yeah, and just to clarify for people out there, it's not confirmed that Adam Christopher is doing this yet, but he's been teasing that he is. So it
Yeah,
basically seems like
yeah.
he's confirmed to do it. They just haven't put his name on the listing yet. But yeah, I know Turkish in the chat said, "What if it's Palpatine, like a origin story of Palpatine kind of thing, like a replacement for Plagueis in some ways, or maybe the Palpatine side? If they wanted to do two books, like make Plagueis two books." And again, I'm not gonna be super excited for anything. I mean, very trepidatious when it comes to anything that's gonna take on Plagueis, just because it's my favorite Star Wars book ever by far. But if that's what they were doing, it could be interesting. If it is Adam Christopher too, one of my favorite characters that he introduces in Shadow of the Sith is Exum Panchard, and what if this is an Exum Panchard story? Do you have, like, an Exum Panchard chapter in that book? It's really interesting. I could see him going back to that. That would be something pretty cool, but yeah, just the title makes you think Vader just right off the bat because of the Obi-Wan quote. So, it
Yeah.
could be any of those types of things, and I'm just here for it as long as it's a dark side book. Said it so many times when he wrote Shadow of the Sith. It's like whatever you think of the world building around, the Luke Skywalker stuff and the rest of it, what he does perfectly is write the dark side. He's so good at writing the dark side. And so all of the stuff around Panchard I thought was just awesome in that book. And so many of the things when it related to Exegol, it was some of my favorite Exegol stuff we've ever gotten. And so I'm just excited to have more dark side, and I'm excited to have him back if he is indeed the writer behind this book because it is really just about time. It's been 3 years now almost since Shadow of the Sith came out. It's gonna be 3 and a half by the time this book comes out. I'm pretty hyped to see whatever it is, but if it is Palpatine Turkish, I mean, I think that would be pretty exciting. I would love to see it. I think I would be surprised if it's as in-depth as something like Plagueis, like you're saying, getting the mantle of the Sith Master. I don't know if they would do that in a book at this point. I think there's still just like with almost every major plot point that we're getting from the main characters of the Star Wars films, they've yet to do anything like that important in a book so far in Star Wars canon. So I feel like they're holding out hope in case they ever do that Plagueis Palpatine kind of origin story series that they might do one day, but we'll see. We'll see. I would be very interested if it was indeed Palpatine, even if it was Palpatine like during, because we're getting Reign of the Empire right now, right? Getting that trilogy. and it's from the rebellion perspective. Like, what if we did get the early days of the Empire from Palpatine's perspective? Like, we haven't really gotten anything from Palpatine's perspective really ever outside of Plagueis. And so, if it was anything about how he's ruling the Empire or anything like that, it would be so cool to see. And even if it is just, yes, he's pure evil, and yes, he's ruling in a fascist dominating, like, you know, manner, just seeing the way he thinks and way he pulls the strings on across the entire war or the early onset rebellions, or if this was during the time of Andor, considering that's coming out this year, if there's some crossover there, because Master of Evil, I would think it would either be, if it is about Vader, it would either be right before A New Hope or right after, to kind of coincide with that quote. But if it is about Palpatine, it would be really interesting to see him dealing with the first little glimpses of rebellion and how he handles all of that as well. So, a lot of cool ideas, a lot of things that this could be. I think they are building up to possibly being the most exciting Star Wars book in a long time, especially when we were kind of looking at what's going to come out for the rest of the year. And it's like, yeah, we've got these Acolyte tie ins, which I'm personally not that excited about. We did have the next High Republic young adult just came out today. So that's pretty exciting. And that we're going to get into that and have that reviewed. Is it coming out next week or today? It's one of the two.
I think
Um,
it came out today. I'm not sure though.
yeah, I thought so too. But then after that, we've got Bad Batch, and I was like, that's not that exciting either because it's taking place in such a weird period for the Bad Batch. This gets me pretty hyped. But let's move on to the next part of this story, which was the announcement of the deluxe edition of Revenge of the Sith. As many people in our chat and as many people across the Star Wars fandom have said, including Anthony in the chat, Revenge of the Sith is an all-time classic Star Wars novel. It's one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest. I always put it amongst my top 4 because I feel like my top 3 I'd have to put like more original books because Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars story ever, just in general. So in any form, it's going to be my number 1 favorite Star Wars thing. But the book is a masterpiece, and it is getting a deluxe edition for, wait for it, $60 coming out this year. So I'm not sure what that entails. They said we'll get more details at Celebration. I know people are speculating and theorizing, okay, is it going to have some of the short stories that may tie in with Revenge of the Sith? Is it going to be kind of like one of those Barnes and Noble leather bounds that they've done in the past? That they did one for Obi-Wan when the Obi-Wan show came out, where they included an Obi-Wan story, a few other books scattered throughout the Star Wars Legends timeline that included Obi-Wan. Will they do like a whole Dark Lord trilogy in this Revenge of the Sith deluxe edition, include Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, and Labyrinth of Evil in this? There's a lot of possibilities for $60. I would imagine it's going to be something like that. Otherwise, I think you're going to have a hard time selling it to too many people for a 20-year-old book. But we'll see what cool details they add. They also did announce that we are getting reprints of the original trilogy novelizations, which they've basically ignored since canon has started. These ones are coming out July 29th. I'm not sure if they are hardcovers or paperbacks, but they do have new covers, which look really, really cool. I like the design and the symmetry between all 3 of them. I think they're really well made, nice covers, and very distinct. Uh, Canon, Disney, they've done a good job of capitalizing on collectors like myself and people who will buy reprints by giving us great new covers. So these 3 are really cool covers. Kind of reminds me of something that would be a part of like Essential Legends collections without being Essential Legends collection. But it is nice to give credence finally to 4 of the 6 novelizations that are not a part of canon. So I'm pretty excited for all 4 of these, but I'm mostly excited just to see what is included in this Revenge of the Sith $60 deluxe edition.
Yeah, I think just looking up the reprints, besides obviously looking great, I believe they are trade paperback. I don't think they're meant to be hardcover releases. But regarding the Darth Vader, $60, does it really make sense? Hardcover or not? Like it's a pretty old book at this point. It's 20 years old. Uh, the Random House World's editor Tom Holler or Dart Internus on a Reddit on the Reddit Star Wars book subreddit said that time will tell. It always does if like that price tag is going to be justified. So definitely seems like something that they're going to hold off on until celebration, maybe some goodies, stuff like that. I mean, it seems like there might be something. I wouldn't be surprised just because we've already heard from Charles Soule that like if you pre-order his book, the conclusion of the High Republic, he's like, here's a list of characters. I'll write a quote or something they would say that doesn't have anything to do with the book, but is like from that character, right? And some people are just buying it for that because they want to know what Charles Soule thinks that character would say. So yeah, I mean, it could be something as simple as that, where maybe Stover is like, yeah, maybe let me think what 2005 me was thinking and what he's thinking about those characters and what they would say in that moment, right? Because obviously it's not canon; it's a Legends adaptation and continuation of the character. So yeah, I think that'd be pretty cool to see something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's like some nice edge colors or maybe some gold foil and stuff like that. Um, just with, like, its reputation that it's garnered over the years, it does feel like it's gonna be a hardcover that's gonna be like a centerpiece. Like, that's the one that we're gonna talk about. That's what you show off to your friends, like, "Hey, this is, like, arguably one of the best Star Wars book, if not the best Star Wars book out there." So, yeah, for sure the best adaptation. So, yeah, I think that'd be some possibilities. I'm not really sure just how much you could do to spruce it up past that. Maybe they have some cool postcards of like behind the scenes work with George Lucas, the writing team, stuff like that. Stover meeting, or maybe even talking to some of these characters, some interview stuff. There could be a lot of things. It could be like a nice package deal, and then get some nice like housing for the boxes and stuff. But yeah, we'll see, we'll see. So I'm excited. I'm just $60 is a lot.
Yeah, and it could be, I mean, it could be an illustrated edition too. They could do a lot of different things to justify the $60 price tag. And when it comes to these types of books selling for that price, there's not too many people who do end up paying that actual price. They'll end up getting it for a lot cheaper somewhere else. But I think in general, the conversation around deluxe editions is kind of an interesting one because this is something that's very commonplace for almost every type of publisher or every type of series that's out there. Everyone does these deluxe editions, whether it's Dune or Lord of the Rings or anything. Almost everyone does these. Star Wars has never really done these outside of just the Barnes and Noble leather bounds that we've seen these last few years, and I think there's really only like 5 of them or so. Uh, we haven't seen Star Wars do too many of this type of thing. So if this sells really well, you could start to see them doing the Thrawn Trilogy Deluxe Edition, the Darth Bane Trilogy Deluxe Edition, the Darth Plagueis Deluxe Edition. You could start to see this all over the place, which is both good and bad. As a collector, you're excited to have something like this. It also discourages sometimes, the continuous reprinting of other stories. If they're selling just one particular story for $60, they might pull back on some of their other things that they might have looked at doing for maybe Essential Legends or other formats in the future, and instead we just re-get everything we already got in Essential Legends now in Deluxe. So hopefully they continue all these formats that they've come up with because despite them getting rid of Legends outside of the continuity, despite us not getting any real Legends stories coming out under Disney, they have done a pretty good job of keeping the reprints going and giving us new formats and delivering on stuff like these unabridged audiobooks, the 4 older books that never got them. So I do really like the hot of a take to say it's better than the film. A lot of us, I think most people would agree it's better than the movie if you've intended way to watch it and the way most of us fell in love with that story first. So I think it would be interesting to have that perspective from somebody who read it as a book first and then saw the movie and then like see, which one that person likes more, if they enjoyed the book, or are they disappointed by the movie, vice versa. because I think most people watch the movie first. But yeah, I don't think that's too hot of a take to say that, but to say it's better than like The Empire Strikes Back or something like that, I think that is the hotter take. But it's very difficult to compare novels to film unless it's a one-to-one comparison.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is opinion, right? It's all subjective. I'm not gonna fault anybody for saying Revenge of the Sith's their favorite because it's a great film. It's my number two, right? I know it's Liam's number one, and it's only because I really do think there's just a superior quality that I can't ignore about Empire, from writing, from direction, from character arcs, everything, right? Like, it's absolutely what I hope for, George Lucas to have done from 1999, from episode 1, but, yeah, I mean, it is a strong culmination because he doesn't really do anything that isn't too shocking to even people who first saw the original film in 1977. You kinda get the general idea. There were rumors that Vader was forged out of, like, a battle near some volcanoes and stuff like that, right? So, it was just kind of piecing it all together and the reasons behind it, adding in the Clone Wars and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, if you like it, if it's your number 1, great. I don't really see anything wrong with that, Anthony, that, it's better than the film is something that I don't know. It really is something that it comes kind of down to what Stover added and, fleshed out. There's obviously stuff that he was basing more on the shooting script that's not exactly the same as, what's there in the final product. Yeah, I mean, if you like it, great. Like, that also comes down to, like, maybe he just mastered the medium. He understood that's what the medium could do to evolve the story. Because there's a lot of decisions about Anakin that even if you do really like episode 3, is it just enough for, like, oh, Padme dying and for him to go all the way down? There's people now, like we say with retrospect, obviously, with the Clone Wars and everything, that were like, "Yeah, no, there's a lot of decisions that, he was making that were gonna sort of affect that dynamic, that there wasn't really a strong foundation there in a lot of ways." What did they really know about each other and the lives that they were leading? There's a lot of things that specific Jedi did, like Mace Windu and Ki-Adi-Mundi, and, like, just the treatment of him, and, like, even his own master did in specific arcs because that's what the Order demanded, right? We could say that, oh, in retrospect, and that's what makes that film better, but Stover didn't have any of that. So, what's the great thing about these books? You can get the headspace of Anakin, you can understand, you see conversations that weren't really essential to the film or cut from the film that probably would have made this closer to that rumored 4-hour cut that's out there that, probably was just a production assembly cut, right? But, yeah, I mean, I'm sure he took that, some of his own imagination, shooting scripts, all that, and that's why it reads so wonderfully, because it's taking the best of all these things and adding his own little spice to it. So,
Mhm.
if you love the film, great. If you love the novel more than the film, not terribly surprising. That's kinda whole the point of novelizations, especially now that we've been talking about, like, why we haven't really seen that. Well, now everyone's got the internet. You can watch anything at the tip of your finger. Even in 2005, you really couldn't do that. You still had to go rent it out, or, like, there's that period between the film coming out and then what's coming next, right? You maybe had Lego Star Wars. Got a little spoiled there from some of the story, but it's not exactly one-to-one. But there was still a purpose for novelizations there, even more so than there is today. So it only made sense that as things were changing around that time, things were starting to become more digital, and let Stover go wild, and he did. He did. He absolutely fleshed it out as best as he could and made it his own, and if you love it, I mean, he did his job. We're still talking about it today. We're still debating if $60 is worth another reprint, but a lot of people are still gonna buy it no matter what.
Yeah, and then on that point, really, Anthony says, I think they should keep the old novelizations of Legends or the old novelizations as Legends because the Revenge of the Sith has somewhat been changed with the Clone Wars 2008 editions. And then Turkish says if Disney does decide to come up with their own canon novelizations of the movies, I hope they hire Stover again to do Revenge of the Sith. I feel like they might go with Charles Soule. I think they will always keep these versions Legends just because all of them, including A New Hope, were all based on shooting scripts, so things always changed. And really, novelizations are just kind of another way of publicizing your new movie. So they're not really a thing that I think people care enough about are going to sell well enough to the larger Star Wars reader audience that you can write a new Revenge of the Sith novelization and expect it to be a New York Times bestseller, you know? Like, so I don't really see them ever doing novelizations for the movies. I think what will be an indicator of whether they think about it is how well this sells. And I agree, Turkish. If they could bring back Stover, that would be ideal. I just don't see them ever doing novelizations for the original six movies at this point. They came out all 20 plus years ago. So at this point, it's kind of like it would be a completionist thing. I would like it as a completionist, but it would be something that feels kind of like a waste of time and money for them as a company to not really promote anything to promote something that doesn't really need promoting, you know? Like, it would be something that's incredibly old. It would really be kind of last case scenario, I feel like, for them. They would kinda have to be really desperate to capitalize on the old stuff, so we'll see, but I don't intend or anticipate them really ever making new novelizations. So let's move on to the next story, and then we'll continue into the chat right after. And it's Path of the Lightsaber, the new manga. We talked about this in the past, but as we get closer to Star Wars Celebration in Japan, we expect a lot more announcements around this new manga. And we did get a plot synopsis as well as a release date for the new manga written by Kenny Ruiz. The plot synopsis goes: Path of the Lightsaber is an action packed adventure that takes the reader along on the relatable journey to learn what it takes to actually be able to use a lightsaber. All Jedi Knights are bestowed an important item that only those in tune with the Force can wield, the lightsaber. These powerful objects disappeared with the Jedi when the Empire took over, but even if you find one, you may not be able to master it. The First Order rules the galaxy, but some still remember the Jedi Knights who once fought the Empire. Nyoka, a resourceful young tinkerer, dreams of becoming a Jedi like the legendary Luke Skywalker. For now, though, she keeps a low profile aboard the Random Luck with her crewmate Baron, an enthusiastic supporter of the Resistance. During an expedition to a mysterious asteroid, Nyoka stumbles upon an incredible find: a lightsaber, the weapon of a Jedi. As she tries to figure out how to use it, she realizes others are after the artifact as well. With danger closing in, Nyoka must protect the lightsaber and herself while learning what it truly means to wield such power. But if she's going to stand a chance, she'll need someone to teach her the ways of the Jedi. So that's an interesting little synopsis. It does come out. Let's see, when does it come out? It's volume one, by the way, as well, which means we're going to get multiple volumes. It comes out November 11th, which is kind of surprising considering we got this announcement so much earlier than it's coming out. I kind of expected a summer release, especially because High Republic is going to be finishing up with its manga in the summer. Kind of expected this to be right around the same time, kind of passing the torch, but I guess we'll get the end of the year. And with it being, Resistance, with it being tying in to the sequel trilogy, maybe it'll be kind of pushed as a Force Awakens tie-in as well, with all the stuff that will probably come out around then, promoting the 10th anniversary of Force Awakens. This sounds fine. I'm as like kind of mid on my excitement for this as when they announced it. It could be good. I just actually finished reading Dragon Ball, all of 16 volumes, so I'm kind of like been on the like more fun manga train recently, enjoying kind of that kind of offbeat humor that Japanese writers have. This is obviously not a Japanese writer, but it's going to be in the spirit. I think some of that more like classic kind of action comedy manga, as opposed to most of what you see today, which is more so along the lines of kind of dark fighting, bloody, gory action in a lot of the mainstream manga that people really like nowadays. So I think this could be a pretty interesting take, something that hopefully will have a little bit more life and a little bit more fun than Edge of Balance has in its main volumes. Uh, but this synopsis doesn't necessarily get me more excited to read than I was before. Hopefully, we'll get a little bit more about like overarching story or what their plans are for the entire kind of run of Path of the Lightsaber at Celebration, and that'll get me a little bit more excited for when this comes out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty standard synopsis. kinda what I expected. Like, a Andrew Tinker or whatever you wanna call finds and stumbles upon a lightsaber. Yeah, yeah, I'm not shocked by it. I'd be very curious to know if this is a character that has the Force or is more like an Alana solo from, like, Legacy Volume 2, kinda on the run there with the lightsaber and all that, so yeah, I don't know. I we've seen some of the art of, like, some of the characters, like, that one, like, bearded guy kinda running away, like, chibi form and, like, from First Order stormtroopers and all that, so I'm like Liam said, I'm not expecting it to be, like, huge or big, but I think it's gonna be interesting that the synopsis does really say, like, the First Order rules. Hopefully, we get to see what that means, right? The only other thing we have that is anywhere close to this is, like, allegiance, and that's all with first of all, not something I really enjoyed. There are some things, interestingly enough, I like with the Mon Cala, with Akbar's son and all that, that I thought, Aftab as a character, pretty interesting to see and all that. And then the connections they were making to, like, the events of the Charles Soule Vader comics and all that. I'm like, "Yeah, okay, that's pretty cool what they pulled off there." But the rest of it, I was like, "It's pretty drab," and it's all very resistance focused. It's not really first order occupancy and what that looks like, right? It's all from the hero's perspective. So, I'm pretty excited to see if maybe we get to see these average people, these average Joes, and what it's like being under the rule of the First Order. Maybe we'll get an understanding, kinda like how we get in the High Republic Adventures of, like, just how far, like, this enemy force has encroached or taken over, right? Not just dialogue, but, like, some interesting maps and stuff. Because 'cause that'd be absolutely helpful, and I think manga is a pretty easy way to just kinda throw it out there. If you're willing to do it with the High Republic Adventures, which is aimed at a younger audience than just the main High Republic comics and the main Marvel comics, you can do this with manga too, and I would say the average audience of a manga might be a little bit more of a wider range, but I think that skews a little bit older than what High Republic Adventures was like, so if they're not afraid there, I hope they're not afraid to do that here. Um, how many we'll get, I'm not sure. I'd love this to be something that bridges not only the gap between 8 and 9, but goes beyond, right? We need more. We need more original content. I'm dying to see what Segura and everybody do in, like, the Marvel comics that are set after Return of the Jedi and Battle of Jakku, like, this is an opportunity to build off of, like, existing stories as their base, movie, event level stuff, and then say, "Okay, what happens in between? What happens after?" Right? So I'm excited. I do get a little bit of, like, that more comedic feel from, like, the imagery, but there's also some really beautiful art. I think there's a lot of manga that people forget that's kind of gotten out of favor in, like, the '80s and '90s that is kinda more, I don't know if Sailor Moon's are right, but there's, like, a little bit more rounder features, a little bit more
Mhm.
sophisticated, but still smaller and shrunken than, like, more anime versions of, you know, very fit individuals, like, people who are action heroes who are super ripped or, like, super strong and all that, right? So, I think it does harken a little bit like that original Dragon Ball run, kinda like that era where, like, things were kinda drawn like that, and you could still have mature themes and all that. Some of the artwork that we've seen too has quite quite nice, honestly. I've been pretty surprised by just some of the stuff that's kind of been tied in with this so far. So I hope to see a little bit more. I hope that all these covers look incredible. I'd like to finally get into even more original manga because, like, yeah, like you said, Edge of Balance, it's cool and all. I especially like I haven't read 3 yet, but I did like, Precedent. I thought that was really good for that Phase 2 tie-in there. But it's all part of initiative. Here, it's its own thing. It can stand on its own. It only has to reference stuff. So, I'm pretty excited. It doesn't feel like it's something that's just added on or tacked on in a way that a lot of Edge of Balance feels like with its scheduling. This can be a really fun thing and carry its weight as we get closer and closer into the full 10-year anniversaries of each film in this trilogy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping it's a really fun alternative to what we've seen from Star Wars manga so far, and that we can continue to get more if this sells
Yeah,
well. I mean, hopefully this does really take off and gives us our first recurring manga series from Star Wars because Edge of Balance, not really, I would say, a recurring series. It comes out kind of as an event manga every time we get a new phase of
yeah.
High Republic, but it's not consistent enough. But when all's said and done, it'll have like what 4 volumes and precedent. So It's kind of, it for being around since 2021, it's not had like this explosive huge release. Like a lot of manga series have 2 volumes, 3 volumes a year. This has
Yeah.
got 5 in 3 years. So it's a little off that pace of being kind of recurring. But let's move on to our final story here, our final big story, and then we'll get into your guys' questions. So, again, keep sending in those questions, those comments, anything you would like to discuss in the chat. We will get to them. It will be mostly first come, first serve. We do like to mix it up, just get everybody a chance to get in. So, if you're at the bottom, don't worry, you probably will get selected if you haven't sent in chats yet. But if you have sent in chats, or if you want to make sure you get something on tonight's stream, send in a super chat. Helps us out immensely. Like you saw earlier, we answered Anthony's. We'll answer it immediately, and it will bump you up to the top. Check out our Patreon and YouTube membership programs for other alternatives for sending in chats. All right, let's move on to our last announcement. And this was announced towards the end of last week, but this is something pretty interesting. We have our next game, Star Wars game for the MetaQuest series of VR consoles. So you've got the MetaQuest 3 right now, and we haven't had a Star Wars game that has come out, exclusively for MetaQuest 3. We had the other ones that were on MetaQuest 2, with Vader Immortal and then Tales from a Galaxy Far, Far Away. Now we have a mixed reality game coming from Industrial Light and Magic and Lucasfilm called Beyond Victory, and it is going to be centered around pod racing, which I think is a very cool concept, especially for VR. Hopefully, it doesn't make us incredibly motion sick, but it does sound really cool. The synopsis is that it focuses on mixed reality with several fascinating doors for immersion standpoints and allows the game makers to literally bring a galaxy far, far away right into the comfort of players' homes. Players will follow Sebulba, the champion pod racing Doug, best known for the Phantom Menace, and a brand new character named Volo Bolus in an electrifying story and variety of unique modes for the player to enjoy, set around the time of Solo, a Star Wars story. So that's around 10 BBY, so right in the middle of the dark times, only 9 years after Revenge of the Sith, 10 years before we get A New Hope. So it's nice to know Sebulba, if this is canon. We don't know if it's exactly confirmed to be canon, but I assume it will be because the other two games are canon. Sebulba's still racing around that time. He's still up to his old hijinks, I assume, and it's going to be nice to catch up with that character. And this new character looks pretty cool, Volo. And then on top of that, you will get a chance, if you are attending Star Wars Celebration 2025, to pick up an exclusive Marvel comic set before the events of the game that is being given away by the ILM and MetaQuest booth. So if you are going to Star Wars Celebration in Japan, you can pick up that comic for free, it sounds like. It is a tie-in specifically to this game. Now, I would imagine this will be made available for most people, at least online. But if you're into collecting physical comics, this might be the only way you could get it. I probably will be released again in the future. But as of now, it's the only way you can get this. So if you're going to Celebration, make sure you pick one up. But it's going to tie in, and it's written by Ethan Sachs, the person who wrote the Bounty Hunters recurring comics series. But this sounds really cool. I'm not 100% sure what mixed reality is. Like, I know it's supposed to use more haptics and stuff like that to give you kind of more of an immersive experience, kind of crossover from just the virtual side of virtual reality. But I've never really experienced one myself. So I can't tell you guys like, oh, mixed reality is this experience that's like so incredible, so much better than regular virtual reality, because I've never experienced it. But it sounds pretty cool. And if they're able to come up with a way to really make you feel like you're sitting in a pod race instead of just, using your controllers to watch a pod race kind of fly by you, i.e., kind of like a more immersive version of Racer in the arcade from the late 90s, early 2000s. This could be one of the best ideas they've had for a virtual reality Star Wars game. I mean, I think they've scratched the itch of using a lightsaber in Vader Immortal. Yeah, it's limited, but the lightsaber stuff is still really good. Now you're going into pod racing. I think that's another dream for a lot of people, and they've done ships with the original Battlefront VR mission for PS4 and getting Squadrons on PS4 VR. You could use that on VR as well. So they've crossed over on a lot of the VR fantasies most people have had around experiencing Star Wars, and I think pod racing is just another one to check off here, and I'm pretty excited to check this out.
Yeah, it's interesting more than anything to me that we're gonna have a situation where Sebulba is around. I would think that the guy would either crash out and either literally crash or and die, or crash out from his entire career, waste away his money on women, on alcohol, and all, just like what celebrity stars kind of do, especially in the outer but doesn't seem like that. Seems like he looks pretty decent. Doesn't look like he's had, like, any scars or anything. Maybe he has a change of heart, and I'd love to see if they make, like, references to the old racer games, like Racer Revenge. He's not really fully turned the script in Racer Revenge, obviously. He still is Sebulba that we know, but I do wonder if they do make some fun nods and stuff like that, this being so far past the prequels, like, what that really does mean for his life and, like, where he is, and is he still actively racing? Is he more of, like, a coach, or is he, like, a retired guy kind of being brought back because of Bolo, right? It'll be very
Yeah.
interesting. The only, like, mixed reality experience that I've had is man, it was at the Void, and which you could
Oh, yeah.
find at a lot of different malls, and it was like it's not Secrets of the Empire, it was something.
I think
Um,
it was Secrets of the Empire, I
was it
think.
Secrets of
No?
Empire?
The Rogue
Let
One
me ch
tie-in one.
uh, was it?
Yeah, with
Uh,
it tied in.
yeah,
It was released as a Rogue One tie-in. It had Vader in it
yeah.
from
Oh, yeah,
Mustafar.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it sucks that it's still not here, but I do
yeah,
remember how cool it was, like, walking through, you could feel the heat from heaters, you could use
yeah,
physical controls, and you'd see in the virtual headset, you pull through there. So, I do wonder if this is, like, one of those games where you might get some cool knobs or something, some things that you could use
yeah,
as, like, maybe, like, a racing setup. I think that'd be really cool, something that's, like a modular in some sense, kinda if you're feeling like Saboba, you can do a setup. If you're feeling like Anakin, do his setup, kinda create your own thing. That'd be a really great way to make a mixed reality. I'm sure there's gonna be, like, if you're in specific, like, nature situations, all that, maybe something I don't know. This is a deep poem. If anyone ever plays the Mystery Dungeon games, it's to infinity. It's definitely the weakest one in the series, but they used to have these cards. These cards you can use and, like, kinda enter portals, and you can make these different worlds and all that different dungeons, right? So I do wonder if it's gonna be something kinda like that where you can use different scenarios, different settings, and it's like, "Oh, you're near the desert or you're near somewhere rocky, and let's, like, kinda carve out a path and how it would look like as you're flying through it." Or maybe you can walk through an area and make the map or, like, the race course, right? I think that'd be really cool to, like, use a lot of our real world, right? So, I'd hope it's something like that. I don't remember if Vader Immortal had, like, a one-time thing where they, like, had a controller that was, like, lightsaber looking. I don't know if they sold it, but I think they no, yeah, so
I
it
don't
would've been
know. I
something
can't
cool.
remember.
Yeah, it would've been cool to have something like that, so I hope that's what this game pushes for. I mean, it's such a weird push for this to be, like, their next big VR game. You would think they'd start trying to push a little bit more plot instead of just the mixed reality experience itself, but again, we're still another we felt like we were a generation or 2 away from VR being mainstream. It seems like we have to add in maybe another generation to that point, so maybe we have to still experience all this ILM X Lab sort of stuff this way, especially now that they're not using the void anymore, which again, if you guys ever experienced it, it was awesome. It was awesome. Like, you would wear the chest pack, and when Vader hits you with the lightning, you're like you could feel it. You're like, "Oh," like, it's, like, squeezing on you, it's, like, vibrating. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, this doesn't seem like a game that'll have that sort of intensity or some features that they just bundle away like that. Again, if they have some cool controllers, some cool setups, and then you can, like, map out your scenario your environment to make different scenarios, different maps that you can, like, race with friends, and I think that'd be awesome. I think it's a nice way of taking that old racer concept and making it more user-friendly and user-generated, which is a great way to keep games going, and especially with virtual reality games, having very limited playability after a while, that'd be a great way to keep them going for even longer.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that, and I'm very sad I did because that was so cool. I did that Secrets of the Empire think 2 or 3 times, and I did the Avengers one too that was there, and I really loved The Void. I'm very sad it's gone. COVID killed it. I don't think it was doing that well before COVID, but they did have
Yeah,
plans to expand to a bunch of other
yeah.
places, so, yeah, it's too bad. Maybe it'll come get a comeback, but it is kind of like when you go do something like that, right, it's so much better than the VR we have at home that
Yeah.
it makes you wonder about the future of VR at home, right? Because there's so many limitations to it versus what you can have in a place like that, but then in a place like that, it becomes more of like a theme park attraction type of thing. It's interesting. It's really interesting, especially when you're gonna be, excuse me, going there, like, paying $30 to do it for 20 minutes, like, it's hard to convince people to spend that type of money even on a very cool experience like that. So, yeah, I wish that would come back. But, yeah, I mean, a as in terms of racing, though, that is one that where you would be, sitting down if you were racing in an actual pod racer, right? So you could buy the setup, and they've done those types of things in the past for non-VR games, whether it's the wheels or the big, racing rigs that they came out with for stuff like Gran Turismo, stuff like
Mhm.
that. So maybe they'll come up with something interesting like that. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, that's it sounds pretty neat. I'm very intrigued to see how they bring the mixed reality to your house. But hopefully, we'll find out some more details from Celebration and hear more people's thoughts and whether they think it was a pretty cool idea as well. Now we're going to turn it over to you guys for the rest of the stream. It's mostly going to be all chats here, so keep sending in your chats. Let us know what you guys think about any of these topics, anything you would like to discuss. Again, this is open. It's ask us anything. We only have a few more weeks of this before we get into Andor, and that kind of dominates our streams for a few weeks there as that show comes out. So if you have any questions to get off your chest, anything you'd like to ask us about anything you want, send it into the chat and we will get to it. Again, it is first come, first serve. But if you did in a super chat, it will bump you up to the top. We will answer it immediately. So check out the super chat options. All right, let's scroll back up to the top. Anthony Tiff says, love to see the Revenge of the Sith novel cover art on a thumbnail. I actually have it on my laptop wallpaper due to it being a couple of weeks from Revenge of the Sith re release. I hope people go to the theater since COVID. At least my experience, there is not a lot of people who go to the theaters anymore. Everything is streaming within a month or so of release, and they don't even sell DVDs that much at retail stores anymore. Yeah, so in regards to that, first of all, I'm wondering. I've been checking like every day. When are they going to post the ticket sales for Revenge of the Sith? Because, like you said, Anthony, we're only I think 4 weeks away or so. 4 weeks from this Friday away from Revenge of the Sith coming out, and I want my tickets, and I want to be able to go multiple times. So yeah, I've been checking every few days or so to see if it's posted on the Regal app that I use, and haven't seen it, but, in regards to the novel, yeah, it's an incredible novel, great cover, one of my favorite covers of Revenge of the Sith, or one of my favorite Revenge of the Sith-esque posters. It incorporates that orange they used so much throughout the Revenge of the Sith marketing with kind of the most iconic Revenge of the Sith image, which is Obi-Wan and Anakin battling, and a great little image of Vader, so it's a good one to have as your laptop wallpaper.
Yeah, I think there have been some rumors from, like, box office theory forums and all that, that they're gonna actually be releasing the tickets for it around April 14th. So, don't hold me on that, but that is that's kinda where people, like, who work in movie theaters, who work in the industry of distribution kind of say that stuff before it's official. So, I say keep looking every day, stay tuned for that, but that might be the date. Um and I think it's gonna almost be like, unfortunately, like a supreme model where it's like you're gonna limit just how many tickets there are the first couple of weeks, and then obviously that huge upswell will be a kick in with word of mouth and everything, and then bam, okay, like, we're gonna extend it out another week, like, that's a great marketing tactic, they're trying to
Yeah,
make it a big thing, right? So and it's I think frankly, it's a good thing too because if we do end up getting a 10-year re-release for The Force Awakens, if that doesn't get more than a week or 2, people use it as ammunition for whatever agenda they have, but it's better to just be, like, conservative, be like, "Yeah, just how much are people, like, actually gonna watch a movie that's 20 years old," right? They can watch it at home, on streaming, on physical media and all that, right? Maybe they still have their old DVDs for it, but Yeah, I mean, if it does well, it's gonna go off, and this is the only one I know there have been some 4DX screenings for, like, The Phantom Menace, but it wasn't really marketed the same way as they are now. I I mean, I'm sure those are good films, but, like, I think this is gonna be probably the best of the prequels in 4DX, other than maybe, like, Padme in the Geonosis factory and that whole blue screen sequence running around and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is gonna be great, especially with just how nonstop the action can be. So yeah, I mean, stay tuned for that, and yeah, I do agree. It's a beautiful a piece of art. I'm glad that people still use it because there is a lot about like the 2005 marketing that hasn't aged the same way as like episode ones did, because that still was so much more analog. That still was more surprisingly like the posters and all that feel like they're not really minimalist, but they have that like the tendency. They seem like they're almost pushing towards that decades before, right? Attack of the Clones, I just think their marketing was just much more shallow. I don't think they really had a budget for it the same way, but obviously with episode 3 at that point being the culmination of Star Wars, they really pushed everything.
Mhm.
Some things work great, right? Like that episode 3 video game cover is pretty fantastic to me. Um, some things didn't, like that Anakin with his robe that's kinda turning into the Vader mask. You're like, "Oh, great concept, horrible execution." Right? Maybe made sense in '05, but not now, right? So that specific art though, that's on that cover, no, that's one of the better ones for sure.
Yeah, and it's the only prequel novelization that got, like, an original cover art
Yeah,
because the others for Phantom Menace had 4 covers. They were just pictures of people from the movie and then pictures of somebody else on the back, and
right.
then Attack of the Clones was a Photoshop cover, just like most of what that Clone Wars '03 initiative, and then a lot of Photoshop covers, so this was one of the only ones to get original art. Pretty cool. And then as in regards to your comment about hoping people go back to the theaters, yeah, it's been an abysmal 2025 so far.
Yeah,
I like to chalk that up to just the fact that most of what's come out has been underwhelming or just bad. So we haven't really had like that movie that's come out and bombed because or bombed without people going to see it, even though it was really good, like a Furiosa last year or Transformers 1 last year. There were a handful last year that bombed that were well received. This year, it's like Snow White bombed, but it wasn't well received. Captain America didn't do as well as some people had hoped. I think it did about as well as I expected, honestly, before the movie came out. Um, but that wasn't that great. So we haven't had the, like, huge bomb and, like, something like Mickey 17 was never gonna make that as much money as they spent on it, so even though it was pretty good. So, uh, yeah, I think if we could chalk up most of this year to just nothing really being out that people have cared that much about, um, in terms of big budget movies, and big budget movies are the ones that get people back in the habit of going to the movie theater, and that's the big thing is you need these big blockbusters in order for the smaller movies to do well because you just need people in the habit and excited to go to the movies. So with all that going on, you kind of like something like Black Bag that didn't do that well. Kind of needs a Snow White to do better so that people are like, I enjoyed going to the movies and I'm going to go see this other movie. But uh, it's just all one big ecosystem. When we have CinemaCon going on right now, which is a movie theater exhibition, basically, it's the studios telling everybody what they are bringing to the movie theaters. And there's been a lot of talk right now about reforms to movie theater experience, which is really wonderful to hear, including big pushes being made by a lot of people to show less trailers, which would be a huge one because that just kills the experience for so many people. We went from what used to be 10 to 15 minutes of trailers, which was already unbearable, to now almost a minimum of 25 to 30 minutes, sometimes more, plus other random advertisements. And that's, I think, killed the experience. So it's just they need to fix a lot of things, and the movie theaters themselves are not helping in this scenario because it's not just the movies. It's a lot of people being like, "Why would I go watch a movie when this 2 hour movie is actually 2.5 hour movie, or this 2.5 hour movie is actually a 3 hour movie?" And then, like you said, Anthony, people are conditioned right now. There's a 14-day window for a lot of these movies before it's available for premium video on demand rental. So that's just conditioning people to expect it available on their TV screen within 14 days if they don't go watch it, which is terrible. So, I think there's been rumors about what they're gonna try to do. It used to be 90 days was the minimum, even a few years ago. Now we're down to 14 days. That's killing a lot of these mid budgets as well. So we'll see. Hopefully, they can get that at least up to 30 or 45, maybe 50-day window. But yeah, I'm hoping more people come to the movie theaters as well. But I expect Revenge of the Sith to do really well. Funnily enough, re-releases have done very well post-COVID, like compared to, not that we had a lot of re-releases before, and they probably would have still done really well before COVID, because the movie going market was so robust. But post-COVID, it's been one of the biggest things. Like, now you just see movies randomly re-releasing for every type of anniversary or
Oh,
just
yeah. Oh, yeah.
once a year now. We're gonna get probably Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or something once a year because every time they come out, they could make money. Eventually, that will stop because they'll stop making money because people are like, "Well, it's gonna be out next year. I'll just wait." But these event type of Fathom events, big releases, random things coming out in theaters for 1 day only, 2 days only. Mononoke IMAX was this past weekend, and that made a lot of money too. So there's some, when movie theaters create that event, people go. And for some reason, the studios can't seem to understand that that people go when there's an event, whether that's like a social event like a Barbenheimer, or you got to see Infinity War before its spoilers come out online, social events, and actual limited time events. And so, like Seneca was just saying with Revenge of the Sith, if they say it's only going to be out for a week, people will go and it will make a lot of money. And I do expect it to make more money than Phantom Menace and Return of the Jedi. But yeah, it's really all, it's both on the studios and the movie theaters to kind of come up with these solutions, but both are doing a very bad job of providing solutions. They're just trying to find ways to make more money off of the people like you and me who are still going to the theaters, instead of saying, "Hey, maybe we can make less money off of it. Maybe we should stop gouging those people who are still supporting us and try to get other people in who also could support us, who used to support us, but now don't support us anymore because of what we're doing to the movie theater experience." So hopefully they start to finally make some changes because it's gotten really bad in these last 3 months. And CinemaCon couldn't be happening at a better time because these last 3 months have been terrible for the industry.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's unfortunate, it really is. I do like, I enjoyed, Captain America: Brave New World for what it was. A lot of bad exposition, very clearly, like, had some sort of fake budget, though in some areas, but some areas, we hear about, like, entire actors and sequences being cut, right? But it's almost at 200,000,000 domestic, because that's how weak the box office has been. It's had no real competition in its category. Like, even last year, or 2 years ago, which was a fairly down year for Disney and all that, right? There was still, like, competition within each little niche and all that. There really hasn't been this year. Even, like, there's a new horror movie that came out, uh, The Lady in the Yard, A Woman in the Yard, like, that
Oh,
one's
yeah.
getting terrible reviews. They're like, "It's just an old school horror bomb." Right? And it's like, well, if horror can't do anything in this day and age, which it has definitely been one of the genres that has carried a lot of post-COVID theaters, like, man, Megan 2.0 can't come soon enough, right? Blumhouse gotta be kicking better. Death of a Unicorn, it's like, okay, I get it. Like, there's what is it? Opus from A24. They're like, well, you're just making that same sort of film that made A24 work. Like, it's becoming formulaic even for them, right? So it's like, man, even indie films are starting to do that thing too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it sucks. Some of the from forums I've been hearing, like, yeah, dude, just cut out the ads, play them on like the borders or trailers. I'd live for that. Just combine them. I mean, don't make us like watch all these stupid like local ads and all that. Like that's cool and all for those businesses. I'm sure they see some benefit, but ads like as much time as the trailers do. Right? Just put out the trailers that'll, like, come out that week, and that's enough. And then, we're talking about these Fathom events and everything, right? Those re-releases usually start exactly as they say they start, which I think that's maybe a
Hmm.
little too harsh sometimes because 'cause you're like, "Ah." Maybe you're running from traffic or something. But yeah, I mean, let's get back down to the 10 to 15. It's made everything sloppier about people coming in. Like, I know I've been sloppier. I'm like, "Oh, I know I got 20 minutes. I
Yeah.
can just go and I'll be fine." That's not fun for anybody, right? So, I really hope that changes. I think the fact of the matter is we're not going back to where we were pre-COVID, right? It seems like that's kind of dead now. It's as sad it is to say, but hope for the best. That CinemaCon announcement, so it'll look pretty good too. Beyond the Spider-Verse was sold as a big freaking lie for last year to have come out or something in like a year or two after it crossed. It's like, nope, it's taking the standard for. It makes a lot of sense why Lord and Miller are kind of getting cut from their like agreement with Sony. They're not really continuing to do that like Spider-Gwen show. They're not gonna it's only Spider-Man Noir and that's it basically. It's and Beyond Spider-Verse. They're kind of done after that when they had a stranglehold on the Spider-Verse and could have been huge creators there. So that's me just getting into tangents, saying that Kathleen might have been a little bit more vindicated. They do seem to be very hard to work with sometimes, even if they are incredible creatives. So yeah, it's been a rough box office. I do think though the summer will be quite strong. We got Jurassic Rebirth, or Jurassic World Rebirth. I don't know why they even call it World again. Just do Jurassic's
No,
like something else, or just go
go
Jurassic
back to
Rebirth.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, just something else. I don't. If you're gonna do another trilogy, which it seems like this will be, go with a different Jurassic something in my mind. Or I don't know what the point of that is, but
I'll tell you why.
yeah,
Because they just changed their theme park ride to Jurassic
exactly
World.
why. I know. I did just go back in December, and I was like, oh yeah, they made it look pretty spruced up and all compared to last time. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean
that's
that's
better, but that
yeah, it's
that's
frustrating.
why.
That's frustrating. Like that's really the reason why they want to have continuity with this trilogy. Like, and I've enjoyed what I've seen from that trailer. I was like, yeah, it does seem like Garrett Edwards' skill set is actually being used right. Like I remember
Mhm.
watching The Creator, I believe it was last year. I was like, man, visually you made this for 80 million. That's insane. And then you also understand that there's like $0 for writing in that story. There's nothing there. So it's like, okay, well, I want to see what he'd do with a little bit more of a budget with story, but then seemingly it does seem like a bit of a tighter budget than some of the world ones were. So, and it looks fantastic. It should be a great summer with Fantastic Four and Superman. I think we're gonna kick off Marvel with the way they've been doing fairly well with Captain America. They'll start doing double features with Thunderbolts, which has been getting some sort of buzz here and there, which I'm actually pretty surprised by the people who actually are recognizing it. And the new trailers definitely are showing off Sentry and all that. So summer is looking stronger. Summer is looking stronger. Now the question is, what are all these in betweeners? What are the ones that are going to bridge us to those big hits, to those ones that get us out there, and that want us to be like, hey, let's go watch a movie with your friends, right? We need to make that happen. And yeah, the windows, I agree. It's crazy because Disney has been much smarter about it. They're like
Yeah,
45 days, right, at minimum, and then others are like Mickey 17 because it didn't reach a certain threshold financially, they're like, "Alright, we're already gonna start the PVOD window," and I'm like, "That's wow, that sucks. That really sucks." Like, I think people forget, and I mean, to be fair, I don't know it's not like I remember it, but a film like Titanic, right? It legged itself out. It really was 1990 if it came out in 97, right? Or
yeah,
yeah, came out in 97, but, like, it was starting to make gangbusters money in like March and April '98. It took a while to get going, and that's not
mhm,
really super feasible, but like maybe people are just missing out on films that they could have let grow and give legs. Like we need to let that happen. It's going to be essential, especially with the bloodbath that is 2026 and that slate. That's gonna be crazy. So
yeah,
you need to have some of these films this year be able to leg out, get people used to the expectation that, "Oh, I'm gonna be able to see a movie a month-ish from now when I've caught up on some other stuff," right? Like that habit has been removed post-COVID, and you're expecting everybody to suddenly fork out all their money next year with the way the global economy is looking right now. Like, you gotta be
right.
smarter about the studios.
Yeah, and I mean, Avatar was the same way. I think it only made like 75 million on opening weekend, the first one. and then it just
Yeah.
kept going, and now it's almost $3 billion, probably get re-released this year and make more, get to 3 billion. But it is, I think, Disney, regardless, they'll always understand that they've got Avatar in their back pocket, so their balance is gonna look nicer at the end of the year when they've got an extra $2 billion in on box office revenue because of Avatar 3. But then
Right.
even if you include, right, because that's coming out the final 2 weeks of the year, if
Yeah.
you end up including how much money that's gonna make in 2026 on top of the crazy amount of blockbusters that are coming out in 2026, if 2026 box office doesn't at least get as close to, like, that 2019 level with inflation and with all these different things since 2019, man, that'll be really depressing next year if they can't get there. But, yeah, it's just death by a thousand cuts with the movie industry right now, like Turkish saying, "I can't remember the last movie I saw in theaters," and asked if did the monkey get good reviews. Heard Heretic was pretty good. Heretic was good. I liked it. I didn't think it was great, but I thought it was fine. I didn't see Monkey. It got mediocre reviews from what I saw, but I wanted to see it. Missed out because came out before I got back from my trip, and I just never made it out to see. But another one that kind of underperformed. But yeah, it's death by a thousand cuts at the movie theaters right now, killing themselves with a poor experience. And I know it's kind of sad because I know at least in my area, a lot of theaters spent a lot of money during COVID to revamp the theaters to make it really nice
Yeah.
when we came back,
Yeah.
and, like, they put bars in the theaters, they added a lot more concession options, a lot more food, added, VIP sections with, unlimited drinks and popcorn and ice cream, and, you got recliner seats, and, yeah, you have to pay premium for them, but, like, you can make a day at the movies now with a lot of different places. Um, and really they've done a great job of trying to improve the experience itself, like the comfort levels of it or the amenities, but they've killed that experience by making people sit there for 30 minutes. And like you said, Seneca, I'm the same way. I show up 20 minutes late every time for movie theaters, because it's going to be at least 20 minutes of commercials. And the problem with that too is if it was 10 minutes of commercials, or, like, let's say they just said, "We're gonna show 3 commercials or 3 trailers." You are willing to sit through that, and because you're willing to sit through that to not miss the beginning of the movie, now you see those 3 trailers and you're like, "Oh, that looks pretty interesting." If you do
Yeah.
it the way we're doing it, and most people are doing it now, and you show up, 20 minutes late to skip the trailers, now you don't see anything else that's coming out. So, like, you don't know what's coming out as a theater goer, whereas, like, me, even in 2019, 2018, could have told you almost every big movie that was coming out the next few years just purely off of how many times I saw the same trailer over and over again, because there were only 15 minutes trailers, and I sat through that more than I'm willing to sit through it now when there's 30. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just they're killing themselves, and hopefully they start to fix some of this, because I love going to the movie theaters, and movie theaters, as the studios need the movie theaters, so as long as the studios need them because they've realized how much more money they can make at the box office than they can make on streaming, they will survive, but it's just a matter of the indie movies and mid-budget movies. Mid-budget movies are dying. We'll see. We'll see how it changes. But yeah, thanks for that question. It was a fun topic to discuss. Turkish says reclining seats have been fire. By the way, yeah, that most places are really good. And like Sanak was mentioning, 40x earlier, that's a fun experience. IMAX, I love. A lot of people have Dolby sound. 40x, or I mean, what is it? What's the one that
Dolby
wraps
Cinema.
around you? No, the
Oh,
one
the, Screen X.
Screen X. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was kinda weird, but, they have all these gimmicks now that do make the theater going experience varied and fun, but it's just everything else. And Turkish says, "I like
Yeah.
to watch trailers. I could care less for commercials with Maria Menounos." Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that, but those only come up if you're there before the allotted start time. Um, I like watching trailers too, but not 30 minutes of them. I don't
Yeah.
mind 5 minute, or I don't mind 3 to 5 trailers, but when you
Yeah.
get 10 trailers and 5 commercials, 2 local commercials, 6 cell phone commercials, and stuff you've seen on TV 5 times, already. Like, it just gets old. So I definitely am am tired of that early part of the movie theater experience for sure.
Yeah, and we didn't have movie theater National Movie Cinema Day last year. It was they were just like, "Well, don't make a lot of money that day, but that's not really the point of that. It's supposed to be look, I get it. There's a lot of places where people have been super unruly, like, especially post-COVID, it's only gets amplified on days like that. You need security, cops, and all. I get that. That is frustrating. You don't wanna, especially, like, working for minimum wage, deal with that. I get that, but you splurge for that one day, and do it maybe a couple of days a year, maybe do it, like, 2, 3 times a year. That trains people to, like, "Oh, we know for sure this is gonna be a fun day. Everyone's gonna be out. This is, like, a nice, like
Yeah.
like a seasonal thing to do." Like, I think people just need to almost be, like, reconditioned back, which doesn't sound right to say, to recondition people to come to a movie theater. It's but at the same time, like, it's been so ruined, right? And you need to make it happen, right? You need to get people to be like, "I do wanna be there. I do wanna go with a group of friends." And, yeah, costs and all that, I understand. I absolutely do. But there's so many great, great opportunities people are missing out because of these short windows, because of these trailers, which, feels very contradictory because so many films now end up cutting their marketing budget, so they're just playing the super long version in movie theaters instead of, like, the theater specific ones that they used to play. Which is like, why are we doing this, right? Like, there used to be such smarter marketing in the late 2010s compared to now. Now everything is just, "Okay, something's coming out in 2 weeks, bam, 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 bam." It's like, "Okay, I guess that's more effective in surging people in, but you're not growing interest," right? That's why I like stuff that I'm seeing from, like, Superman, stuff that I'm seeing from Fantastic Four. It feels like pre-2020 again, and where it's like they're trying to get people to think about it, think about, like, what you're trying to create, the vibe, the ambiance, and that's so essential. Streaming used to do that too, but they've kinda stopped as well, right? Like, now, like, Andor is it took so long, but now they're finally pushing that out. You don't have to like Acolyte, but I was really a fan of the marketing push. They really were trying to make that be visible to everybody versus something like Ahsoka, which didn't really get that, it was a bit frustrating, right? So, and obviously Skeleton Crew got nothing because it's kinda dumped out there, so word of mouth, but yeah, if you want that to work out for everybody where they talk about it naturally week after week and build up to it, you still also have to drop these nuggets. People have just stopped. And yes, I do think people also need to be just told off in movie theaters. It sucks that you're gonna have to have, like, managers kind of be patrolling for that to really be enforced these days, but if that's the way to get people to remember, "Hey, you're going to a movie theater, it's not a recommendation, turn off your phone or keep it on silent." Do it, right? It might be rude, but maybe that's a great way to, like, condition some more unruly places to, like, be a little more appreciative of that. And if you want that sort of vibe, go support your local drive-in. Like, those are dying, but they're still
Mhm.
wonderful experiences. Go to them. It's at least something to do once, like, every couple years, and it's
Yeah.
fun. It's definitely fun, and it's a way where you can experience the film in your car and in your own way, your comfort level, your music, while you're still, like, having a group experience. So yeah, I know that there's people in the chat that are like, "I haven't been able to go, I haven't thought about it." Just try, just going up to a movie theater one day and just sitting down and watching a movie. I think we've gotten to this point now, it's like, "I have to watch this. I'm not getting informed about it, so why would I watch it before I even select the movie?" Like, sometimes people
Right.
used to just walk up to movies, guys. It doesn't need to have all this crazy massive, like, Barbenheimer upswell for us to go out. Just try it. You'll see the type of movies that you're missing out on because that's the type of movie that used to thrive in the '90s and 2000s with 25 million budget, but then would have long legs for, like, 3 months.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's sad because the ecosystem of movie going relies on so many factors, and when
Yeah,
each one is damaged, then it causes the whole business to fall apart, and I think the studios were really the first one to damage it by saying, "Ah, we don't need those people, we'll stream everything," and then they realized, "Oh, crap, we can't make as much money streaming as we can." Even with a captive audience like COVID, we can't make as much money putting Mulan for streaming only or, Black Widow for streaming and theaters as we can just dropping something in theaters, and so
right,
that's hurt it, and it makes people like, us, people who are online criticism, people who are legit movie reviewers, certified movie reviewers, that power is even stronger now because everything's more expensive. People don't really have the motivation to go to the theaters. They really need stuff that is a guaranteed hit for them. They feel like they're actually gonna get something out of it. I think all of that is a factor. So it's a great question. Thank you so much, Anthony. And we appreciate the good conversation, good debate there. It was fun to talk about that topic. Anthony also says Adam Christopher is the writer of Master of Evil. He's good. Yeah, he's rumored, heavily rumored to be. I'm not going to say he's confirmed yet, but he's heavily rumored. I love Shadow of the Sith, easily one of my favorite canon novels. I was here last week, or I was not here last week because I had college things going out. Thank goodness I get out at the end of May. Uh, well, okay. I'm glad you're here this week. But yeah, as Adam Christopher, I think he would be a great choice to write another Dark Side novel. Hopefully, he is confirmed to be the writer at Celebration. And then Anthony says, I did get to play some video games this weekend, played Halo Reach on my Xbox 360. Graphics are really good for 2010. Opinions on Halo Reach, on Halo in general. My favorite Halo is Halo 3. I have played every Halo except Halo Wars 2. Um, and I generally enjoy the series. I'm kind of with you, Anthony, where I like my peak interest in Halo was Halo 1, 2, 3, and Reach. And then I really did enjoy Halo 4. I was blown away by Halo 4's graphics when it came out. But then when it took them forever to make Halo 5 and then Halo Infinite, I kind of fell out of the series a little bit. I did enjoy Infinite. I thought it was a return to form, at least with gameplay standpoint. I know there were a lot of problems with some people were having with online stuff and some of the battle passes and stuff, but I never pay for anything like that anyways. So I had fun playing some game modes. I played like the Halo version of Sticks and Stones, like the one shot thing with pistols a lot with Infinite. But I had fun with that. I did not like Halo 5. I thought it was boring and forgettable. But yeah, overall enjoyed it. My favorite game would I need to do a replay of all of them because all of them, or at least the original trilogy, because I've loved all three of them at some point as my favorite, but it's between 2, 3, and Reach for me because I really loved Reach. I did play the story mode on Reach so many times. So I'm glad you got to replay that, or if it was your first time playing it, enjoy that game again because it is such an underrated one. But yeah, I was gonna say 3 as well because it's that great finale, but 2 is also really excellent.
I can't really add to this because I only ever played really multiplayer at friends' house. I was always a PlayStation kid growing up. That was when Halo in its peak was like the reason to buy an
Hmm.
Xbox, right? So I've played a little bit of the story of Reach, and I really enjoy that, and I think it's a beautiful ending for Bungie, kind of with their involvement. And then 343 came, and I know people really hate 4, but I have nostalgia for it. I just remember a lot of
Yeah.
people having good vibes around it. I think now looking back, it's supremely over designed, and it's a little weird of a start again. But I think they had a decent foundation. But then 5 doesn't really continue it in any ways, right? Like it's kinda just there, like, yeah, there is, like, that whole plot with Cortana that, like, builds off of 4, but, yeah, I don't know, it's not executed well. It's not really executed well. Infinite, I think, would have been pretty good if they actually spent time on it, mostly on the game instead of working on the engine with half their team dedicated to that, so, um, I I know it's kinda silly that it's, like, a rebrand now to Halo Studios, and you're like, "Oh, they're using Unreal, maybe that." It's all like just lipstick on a pig at some point. But I'm a little bit optimistic. I do think that Infinite made enough right steps in the direction that it should be going. It's just now a matter of like tying it all together, making sure that all this current stuff works, and moving past the Halo TV show because wow, there are adaptations that people do not like, but that one was just it felt wrong. And I thought season 2, from what I saw, it seemed a little bit better, but yeah, like, I know people I watch Wheel of Time and I read the Wheel of Time books, and people who read those books hated Wheel of Time, but those are 15 books. The Halo games are games. You could very easily adapt it. I never really understood what was going on there for it to be
Yeah.
this wrong, so weird, and so bad, but it was, and it's gone, so now if your games are gonna be your focus, make them as cinematic as possible in those cutscenes again. Make it feel like an incredible multiplayer game that actually has rotating maps and everything. Have Forge from the start. And please, for the love of God, bring back co-op split screen. Why is that not a thing? Like that was, like, the way Halo was played. It was revolutionary for so many people to be able to be like, "Hey, just pull up. I got an extra controller. We're just gonna play. We can do co-op campaign. We can do all this." This was I just miss all that stuff, right? I think Halo was such a forerunner for everything that now it's just like, "Okay, well, what is it gonna do to get back?" Like, when people say like, "Oh, Star Wars has slipped," I look at Halo. Halo has completely disappeared, and they've had so many false starts to get back to where they were. So, here's to hoping that, we get a story as good as at least 3 or 2, maybe even 1 as a starting point. If Infinite is our 1, I hope to I just really hope that the next one is actually really pushing it and building off of it, and not just forgetting and jettisoning like they have in the last few games.
Yeah, I hope so too, because I did enjoy a lot of aspects about Infinite for sure. I thought the story was kind of forgettable, but I liked the gameplay side of like how they brought it and made it a little bit more open world, a little bit more expansive, a little bit more choice element to the game. I thought that was fun, and I thought multiplayer was fairly good. So yeah, it's a fun franchise for sure. It's just yeah, like you were saying, it is one that used to be such a dominating part of pop culture, and now it's one that's kind of at the back of my mind unless there's a new release, and they don't release games quick enough to make you continually think about the franchise. So, hopefully, it can get back to its glory days. Critical Thinker says, "What kinds of genres would you want to see Star Wars tackle more that it hasn't already? What mediums would be best for those genres?" Well, thanks for that question. That's an interesting one for sure. As for, well, I mean, books would be the easiest place to tackle a variety of genres in true genre fashion, right? You could really embrace tropes if you were doing a book because anything can happen in a book. Your creativity, your imagination can run wild. Whereas in film, not only would you have to tackle those genre cliches, those genre tropes, and make a Star Wars movie that embraces those tropes, but also is a good Star Wars movie. You would have to deal with character and like where does this take place in the lore and the world and all of that. So if we're putting aside like the implications around the larger Star Wars universe, I mean definitely horror. And I know you have a horror question coming, but I would love to see a Star Wars movie in horror. We'll probably never see it unless they do decide to do some type of Marvel-esque special presentation direction for Star Wars, but I don't see that happening because Marvel's basically stopped doing that. Although we're getting a Punisher one soon, so maybe that'll resurrect those. Um, but yeah, I don't see Star Wars really ever tackling that. I would love to see horror be the main focus. I think a thriller as well, because we have seen something like Trail of Shadows in High Republic do a really interesting murder mystery thriller, at least for the first few issues, and then it kind of tailed off as it got more into like the High Republic Star Wars isms. So I would love to see Star Wars commit to genre if it's going to embrace genre, because that's kind of the big thing for Star Wars is like it's kind of a being a sci-fi fantasy and one of kind of the originators of the sci-fi fantasy genre is kind of a genre all its own. So it's kind of hard to push Star Wars into another genre without it losing a bit of its Star Wars to fully embrace that genre. But I think that's what they would need to do, which would then, bring up the argument is, well, is a horror Star Wars movie that has lightsabers and blasters actually a Star Wars movie, or is it just a horror movie with Star Wars iconography, right? So it's a very fine line to tackle, but horror would definitely be the one off the bat. Star Wars has so many elements of comedy and of action and of sci-fi and of fantasy that I feel like it tackles those. And really, when it comes to fantasy and sci-fi, like I liked a lot of what Mace Windu Glass Abyss was trying to do in terms of building out and really focusing on a new sci-fi world and mythology. But it didn't work for most audiences, and I think the payoff overall for the character didn't necessarily work that well for me. But so when we look at Star Wars experiments into more classic sci-fi, because that would be another direction that would interest me, it hasn't necessarily connected with a lot of people who love Star Wars because Star Wars is innately not part of that kind of classic sci-fi. It's its own thing. And so when you steer away from that, does it start to become not Star Wars anymore, right? So that's another one. But yeah, I think horror would be the number one for me that I think you could bring enough Star Wars isms in to make kind of a maybe a looser, not family friendly per se, but something that could be a little bit more PG-13, borderline R type horror movie that has a little bit of comedic relief, has a little bit of lore and world building, connects to some of the fantasy elements, rather than just being kind of a slasher movie where somebody stalks somebody in a Star Wars cliche, or like you're mentioning with Death Troopers, just a zombie movie in Star Wars. Like they could do something really lore based that could elevate horror in Star Wars and come up with a concept that's truly unique amongst like more traditional Star Wars horror cliches that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's where late EU is at least trying to experiment a little bit more. It well, the biggest one obviously was horror, like you said, like Death Troopers and Red Harvest, uh, experimental books, right? Like books that you're not really expecting to fill out an initiative or at a time period or something. It might be set during it, but it's not necessarily trying to connect to anything larger, right? So I'd like to see a little bit more of that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still think there really is not really like explorative fiction, like expansionism, themes of like moving and growing and what the galaxy looks like. It's not necessarily a genre, but we don't really see Star Wars as ever growing. It's almost like we're falling backwards, we're regressing. We have to return to a state that was better or like pick up the pieces, right? And I guess that is makes sense for a lot of cases with war, but war unfortunately has also been where incredible innovation has come out of, where incredible technology leaps and advances for the people who do survive, the people who aren't affected or survive an ordeal end up get benefiting from, right? Like so much of America's strength today came from the fact that most of Europe was devastated, but then soldiers would come back, they'd have the GI Bill, right? They'd get to expand and build into their businesses and all that. It pushed agriculture to a whole new level because you needed to save so many people who were refugees, right? Like, we have proof that wars can be kind of good, right? And I think there's some interesting ideas of that, kind of push with song forming and all that, like the reformed version and legacy, but that it was never really something that would be purely expanded on or like thought of in great depth in a comic medium, especially as like a plot point, right? Like I'd like to see more of like what comes good out of Star Wars, right? Some more expansions into like what was it like to get into the colonies at first, then the mid rim and all that. We have so many stories in the outer rim, a lot in the core worlds, but nothing really in between, right? It's just like you have characters in between and stuff like that, but you don't really see it. So yeah, I'm not really speaking on genres per se, more just like the ideas that I'd like to see explored. Because you don't have to be like, oh, everything's out Dawn of the Jedi. You can war has destroyed the Star Wars galaxy over and over and over again. You can constantly restart. I'd like to see if that restart has a little less to do with the military and a little bit more to do like is born out of the war. What are some things that are most explored and all that. And I think that's something that's Star Wars, despite everything being a war in it, has never really touched on because that is a fact. History has proven time and time and again that the survivors oftentimes pick up the pieces in really interesting ways, and it's not really something that these books have ever really done, which I think is pretty surprising because you think that'd be probably something great to have, like, in, like, its own standalone trilogy, right? So, I like stuff like that. True crime, obviously, I wanna see stuff like Coruscant Nights, I think that'd be pretty big. Um, and I haven't watched a lot of Star Trek, but like I said, exploration of Star Wars, exploration of the unknown regions, exploration of not just concept, but places in the galaxy, right? Where you can do these cool things, initially bring a lot of alien civilizations, all that, and then other stories can do more of the grander events or like the really interesting Jedi or Force philosophies and all that are born out of connecting to the rest of the galaxy. But at that point, it's new, it's fresh. So, maybe a little Star Trek in that way, you don't have to get super discombobulated with, like, terminology and sci-fi concepts, but maybe, like, go for stuff like that. I think that's stuff that books are missing, and it's sorely missed that Star Wars kinda relies on these kind of concepts as, like, oh, throwaways in comic books or, like, back in the old days, like, the source books, like the guidebooks where you'd be like, "Oh, here's interesting facts about this alien race and their planet and all that." Like, that could be a book if you do it right. You really could.
Absolutely, it could. And Critical Thinker says maybe something more akin to hard sci-fi, but in Star Wars. And then Turkish says I feel like hard sci-fi is inherently incompatible with the spirit of Star Wars. Star Wars is never really sci-fi heavy. Um, and that's kind of the age-old debate, right? Because I mean, I
Yeah.
use Mace Windu as an example. That was something that a lot of people's biggest criticisms of that was the world building, how much time is spent on world building and heavy, hard sci-fi, Dune-esque type of Star Wars mythology that's being added there. But I actually found that kind of interesting. So, like, I agree, Turkish, that science itself and the advancements of science isn't really at the heart of Star Wars, but I think you could do a more a gritty, grounded, you know, science based type of Star Wars story if you wanted to, as long as some of the fantasy around it is still kept.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the place where you could do that specifically is when they're doing Dawn of the Jedi, right? If you're starting to do early Star Wars stories, formation of the Republic, formation of different factions, the science has got to be a bigger part of that because of the initial onsets into space exploration and meeting different cultures, meeting different worlds. That's where we're going to see how much of hard sci-fi or classic sci-fi is brought into Star Wars with something like that and how they tackle that in canon. I think that'll be something really interesting to see them do here. But yeah, I mean, I think Star Wars has actually tackled quite a few genres already in its very few like spin-offs and TV shows where Mandalorian's kind of a Western. Um, Rogue One had that war type of tone. Andor has that kind of war political thriller type of tone. I think all of those are things I would like to have seen and like to see them do more of. I think war, especially, is something that can be continually gripping in Star Wars, especially if Disney wanted to continue to do spin-offs or the stories told within the confines of the Star Wars saga that we have now, instead of broaching new directions in the future or far distant past. They could continue to broach a lot of different types of war inspired action movies or espionage movies. Star Wars espionage movie sounds fun. We just kind of got that in Outlaws, but I feel like just they'd have to be different. I don't want just like your classic Outlaws esque, like we got to put together a team and we're gonna do a heist. Like we've seen that done so many times in a lot of different franchises. So I would prefer it to be something a little bit different. A spy thriller would be fun. Turkish, I think that would be something pretty cool. A political thriller in terms of movies or continuing to flesh out different time periods in terms of politics would be really interesting. But yeah, I think horror is just the one that they haven't done yet on film that I would really like to see. And some people consider animation a genre. I don't really consider it a genre. I consider it a form, but animation, because they haven't done Star Wars animated film since the Clone Wars movie. So, and I said it a few weeks ago, there's no reason that a studio that's basically only dedicated to making movies for one franchise can't put out an animated movie every once in a while. Like, there's just no reason to. And now we've got, Spider-Verse making such big money in terms of bringing over superhero animation into the mainstream on screen instead of it being like a direct to VOD thing like it always was in the past. So you've got that now popularizing animation in terms of that genre. You have anime just making big bucks in terms of box office, pushing out animated movies. I mean, so much so that even things like Demon Slayer are ending their shows with films instead of TV. Star Wars should be right there capitalizing on the surge of animation. So if you want to consider animation a genre as well, Star Wars needs to be in animation soon, and they need to do things that are specific to the animated medium, not just tell interesting animated stories, but try to push animated boundaries through the use of Star Wars and what makes Star Wars, and tell unique Star Wars stories via the animation that could help enhance those stories. So I think that's a big one for me as well. Critical Thinker says a film noir with a Jedi instead of detectives would be super fun. Yeah, that's one I think would be pretty interesting. And then Turkish says, I mean, I want a John Le Carre spy thriller in Star Wars, and I think Andor Rogue One weans close into that territory. Yeah, and it does, and that's kind of why off the bat it was kind of hard to think of another genre outside of horror because a lot of Star Wars things have gotten very close to touching nearly all the genres. Because I don't think any of us really want a straight up comedy or something in Star Wars, or straight up like 80s B action movie in Star Wars. Maybe some people would want that, but
Oh,
I feel like it's a
you're not selling it to me now. Now I'm kinda excited for it. I'd love to see something like like a Space Ghost, but with, like, Jabba's palace aliens and stuff like that, like, talk show or something, just like I'm not saying I wanna see, what was the Detours? I don't know if I'd love Detours. I think
yeah.
Detours would be a little too much, but maybe something just throw on like that would be like, like after a night partying or something, just be like, "Whoa, I just need to get like my mind to see something super silly," right? Maybe it could work, but yeah, yeah, it'd be a hard sell.
Yeah, it would, and I think Star Wars is just it's gotta decide what it wants to do with film and stuff too, right? Because 'Cause we've talked about
Yeah,
this many times in the past about how Star Wars just feels so restrictive because you're working in time periods, and you're working in eras, and you're working with established sets of characters, right? You're not given the reins to be like, "Okay, why don't you take Thor and make it a comedy like Marvel is willing to do," you know? Like, in Star Wars, it's very much all part of one cohesive lore. And so you've got to pave stories that work with that. So that's where I've argued so many times in the past not to keep bringing it up, but doing that Legends alternate universe or just any type of alternate universe or pushing so far into the future, so far into the past that you can experiment and tell new stories and do something that's new if you get away from the confines of the Skywalker saga storyline. But if you're there, it's hard to make a straight up comedy and have anybody really care or really attach themselves to the main part of the lore because it's tied down by so many other things that are going on. Like it's going to be hard to make a straight up comedy in the midst of the reign of the Galactic Empire in the dark times, you know. So it's like, it's a difficult thing to do with Star Wars, come up with different genre tropes. But yeah, I hope they start to experiment a little bit more in the future because it's one of the only things that's going to make Star Wars grow and continue to find new avenues is if it branches off in other directions outside of its main story, as long as it keeps that main story the core of like its big pushes into storytelling. Like we can't make Star Wars just a gimmick film series. We've got to have some type of core there, whether that's Mandalorian or whether it's a return back to recasted original trilogy characters or whether it's returning to prequel characters or continuing to focus on what happens after Rey in episode 10, 11, 12. Star Wars has to have some type of core that really holds true to the franchise, but they can experiment in different ways if they want to find other avenues to exist and bring on new fans. That's just I don't think it can be attached to what the core is of Star Wars.
yeah, yeah, and again, like you said, I don't believe animation is a genre, but, like, we need to get anime films, get an anime trilogy. I know someone was asking about, like, why didn't we get to see the Mandalore stitched together into the movie theaters? There was rumors of it. That would've been insane to see, and I hope that still happens, but each episode isn't really cut cleanly. It's almost like you'd have to make or add a couple of shots or something to make it work, but yeah, I mean, if whatever comes next for animation on theaters screens for Star Wars has to look different than Clone Wars, that's my opinion. I love the style, but it's not new. It's not really revolutionary. It's not really trendy anymore the way it was maybe in 2020 even. Now it's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, we've seen it for an entire other show that's run its whole existence with Bad Batch. We might see it again with the Pat show or something like a Dark Time show or whatever. So yeah, I know we said like, I think the thing we said about Star Wars is that it's kinda hard. It's kinda hard to see, you know, it just be a single genre, right? It's always Star Wars is a blend of so many different mythical concepts, cultures, pop culture. It's all blended together and then processed out and then added new things on top of it, right? So it becomes its own like thing, but it's still based and rooted on multiple different sources in a way that not many franchises are, right? So you could see something like the MCU where you're like, okay, you can go with those more Superman heroes or the superhero characters that have like just like superhero strength, like a Captain America or something, right? So you get in the military, you get into, crime, you get into espionage, you get those like certain tropes to it. Star Wars doesn't it's a weird contradiction. I think it has so much mixed to it that everyone's like, "Oh, it's this, this, and this," but that's the thing, it's so hard to nail it down in a way because it's never really been like that other than the main 9, right? It's a weird thing. You feel like everyone knows what it is, but then when you actually discuss it, you're like, "Oh, no, you think of Star Wars more like you think of Star Wars more like that." So, it's weird. It's a tough one. I agree with Liam. There could be another core. I would assume it's either gonna be something set way in the past or way in the future. Old Republic would probably be a nice core that would feel familiar, but still have enough differences, and could span for a long period of time instead of just this, like, 60-year window that the Skywalker saga really resides in. Um, but one thing I'd say of books that I'm kinda surprised they haven't really reached into is, like, getting into that romance genre, like, book talk is so huge. So many adult people just do not read, like, sci-fi and all that naturally unless they have been, right? There's a whole audience out there that loves romance books. I'm surprised with how Lost Stars was a big success while still having some pretty interesting plot. We haven't seen a sequel to that or books of that nature. If you want Star Wars to expand to the more non-traditional audiences, especially with a huge, massive, like, immediate following, I am kinda surprised we've never gotten anything similar to Lost Stars in a book form. We've kinda gotten some maybe, like, little kid stories and all that, right, that have some romantic elements, and there are romance in Star Wars, right? It is an element of Star Wars, but it's never something that's been an entire, like, story underlying genre, right? Which I'm kinda surprised by. I'm not saying it's something I would love to read, but I do think it'd be something that should be taken advantage of, right? You'd think that they'd jump into that audience that's so willing and ready to gobble up stuff like that. So, it'd be a great entry point for so many people, but just hasn't happened.
Critical Thinker says, "What do you want to see out of a Star Wars horror movie that isn't adapting Death Troopers or any existing Star Wars horror story? Who would you want to direct it, assuming there are no limits and an R rating is on the table?" Well, yeah, obviously not including Death Troopers. I think, like we've kind of been talking about, like I was talking about earlier, Star Wars doesn't work as well if it's like, let's do an homage to a slasher and just have these people locked in a room and somebody's coming after them. Um, Death Troopers is genuinely just zombies with Star Wars, and that's what makes it fun. But it is like if you watch that as a movie, it's fun reading it as a novelty book, right? But you watch it as a movie and you're like, okay, I think it would be pretty bland as a movie. It would feel like you're just trying to do Alien, but with zombies in space with Star Wars characters, right? So, personally, I would love to see any Star Wars horror movie that they did revolve around the Sith and Sith lore and try to use that lore like an ancient Sith temple that people stumble upon, or Jedi who have to confront some type of undead Sith, i.e., like an Exar Kun, but something even beyond that. If you went to like, let's say you did something after the Old Republic ends, before the High Republic in that kind of middle period, you have a bunch of Jedi saying, "Hey, we're trying to stamp out the remains of the Sith, and we're going to Korriban to destroy the remnants of the Sith lords in the Valley of the Sith, or get rid of the last vestiges of the Brotherhood of Darkness, or Darth Bane, or Darth Revan's tomb, desecrate it, right? Like, I'd love to see something where the spirits of the Sith kind of create this trippy existential horror movie in the vein of that season 6 of kind of the Clone Wars that we see Yoda go through some of these trials, psychological horror, slasher violence, but not necessarily slasher cliches in terms of character development and world building. I'd love to see some characters brought into it that are a little bit more advanced and can actually like handle themselves where they might not get killed immediately on the first trap or first kind of moment that happens. You can bring some Saw isms into it in terms of the traps and the escape rooms and stuff like that. But yeah, just kind of combine a bunch of different horror genres and make something that embraces the lore and embraces the spirit of the dark side, because really I think Star Wars is sci-fi fantasy, so you could kind of do anything. You could come up with any type of horror creature that could exist out of Star Wars vampires, as we've seen in the comics, or it could exist out of zombies, as we see in Death Troopers. But to me, those things will always feel like some type of homage to our world of horror. I'd love to see some horror sprouted out of Star Wars itself and really getting into the depths and the darkness of the Sith and some of the occult practices. And now that you have Sith Eternal and like an entire group of people who literally just live to worship the Sith, uh, you could kind of create even more occult, demonic kind of vibe around the Sith and ancient ritual and resurrection and that type of stuff, as we are alluded to in the Rise of Skywalker. So you can use Exegol as one of those bases as well. But yeah, I'd love to see anything that kind of embraces the dark side as its base for horror and incorporates different types of horror uh, genre tropes to create a truly Star Wars experience within the world of horror.
Yeah, I've horror is one that I don't know if I care too deeply to see because it's so hard to do it without being, you know, R. R, NC-17 even. I don't know, we're already kinda getting elements of it in Ahsoka that I would've liked to see, like, sort of zombie stuff with the Night Sisters, especially, like, the George Romero-esque shots. I know people don't love how they walk, but it screamed to me George Romero zombies, so I was actually pretty pleased by a lot of that stuff. Could they look a little better? Yes, but still very pleased by the inspirations there. I don't know. I mean, I feel like you'd have to be like possession horror. That's the one I'd kinda like to see, especially because we have so much in comics and books about ancient Sith, like, kinda taking over these unsuspecting student's body or burning them out and all that, like, still to this day, like, even if I don't really love Jedi Academy as a concept, the trilogy just feels so underwhelming and has some very extreme choices, like the Sun Crusher and all that. The character of Gantoris I thought was fantastic for how short-lived he is, and then having Exar Kun take over his body and, like, how he's, like, burnt from the inside out and all that, like, I'd love to see something like that. I'd love to see, like, someone who's unwittingly or, like, makes a choice and, they work with their Jedi master and all that, they're trying to get past it, but they can't, they're not released unless they do certain things and all that, and I love to see, like, a horror where they have to, like you have to be turned against your family and friends, you have to do these incredible messed up things, and nobody would understand you because they don't see this, they don't know what's in your headspace and all that, so possession horror would be something really cool I'd like to see. Um, Star Wars has had cults, it hasn't really gotten as cultish as you would think about when you think about, like, real cults, so I'd love to see, like, some more cult horror, like isolationist colonies or, like, separated groups of from ancient Sith, ancient Jedi, and just see, like, how messed up they've been because of their planet or diet or something, right? I'd like to see people kinda stumble into that sort of things there. But again, as much as Star Wars is fun and all, Star Wars horror can be fun and all in books, if someone's gonna watch it, it's hard to do a lot of that stuff in a PG-13 vibe, and I wouldn't want it to be something too much. Horror in Star Wars to me has always felt like, "Hey, okay, this is terrifying." Not, "Oh, this is gruesome and bloody and disgusting, and I wanna, like, close my eyes." It's more like, "Oh, man, like, this is it. This is the end." Right? So, like, when we look at the Vader Rogue One sequence, that's it. That's all I really need from my movies, but, yeah, I don't know. If a kid can't watch it or, like, tag along with a parent to watch it, I don't really think it's a genre for Star Wars, that's kinda my take there, but if I had to do it, it would be maybe, like, possession horror or, like, more spiritual, cult horror, stuff like that.
Well, thanks for that question. That was a fun question. Oh, we didn't answer the director part. It's tough to pick a director, and we went we did a director's tier list on who we thought could direct a Star Wars movie, without knowing the exact type. But if it's hard to pick a director, but if we did something similar to what I was suggesting, um, I would throw, well, horror directors that I would throw in as just people who I would like to see direct a Star Wars movie. Guillermo del Toro would be up there amongst my top. He's directed plenty of horror that kind of, like you were saying, Sonic, you would like to see Star Wars maintain that ability to keep its more general audience, even if it did horror. I think Guillermo would be the perfect type of person to kind of incorporate different types of horror with having more of a spirited family, or at least adults, early teens, late tweens kind of age type of horror, for everybody. So Guillermo could be a good pick. One of my favorite directors working today would be Robert Eggers, and he's never going to do a Star Wars movie, but I would love that. So if we're talking hypotheticals, Robert Eggers. But if we're talking realistic, I think Guillermo del Toro would be one of my top picks for people who have directed Star Wars, who I think or have directed horror, who could make a great Star Wars movie that hits kind of every quadrant of moviegoers.
Yeah, I mean, Ari Aster, that would be my first choice, just because he can put a lot of plot, and you can be carried by that and, like, the tension of that before the horror elements kinda take over. I think Jordan Peele would be pretty interesting if you wanna do more, like, sci-fi horror,
Yeah.
especially with, uh, what is it? I'm blanking on the
Nope.
film, Nope, yeah, Nope is
Yeah.
really, really interesting. If Wes Craven was still alive, I think it could be pretty interesting. Um, you know, I don't know if I would love something like David Lynch in Star Wars. I know we got very close with Return of the Jedi, but, um, it would be crazy, like, my mind would be blown, and I don't know if it'd be necessarily in a good way, because I probably wouldn't be able to piece together what that was, for what
He
when it
also
comes to
passed
Star Wars,
away too.
Yeah, and he just passed away, so, like, that's not a great option either, unless he's got something in the bank that we don't know about. Um, I think the horror that he did create was getting cut out of the editor's room from his Dune film. I think that's already horror enough for him. Um, I don't I don't know. Mike Flanagan would be pretty interesting. I think he's done
That's
a
a
lot
good
of
pick.
very interesting, like, genres that then genre shows that then turn into horror or start off as horror and expand out in different ways. Yeah, I think those are some that I would say, and, I don't know, I mean, I think a Spielberg could actually pull off a horror. I think he's gonna do that UFO one pretty soon, that film that should be sort of horror-ish. I'd like to see what that's like, conspiracy, like, no one believing you sort of vibes. I'd like to see something like that, in Star Wars. I think that would work.
Yeah, he would be a good I think he would be a good pick, and he's also done some genre movies as well, sci-fi genre movies, so, he would be, yeah, he would be an interesting choice. I'm gonna sorry, Anthony, I'm gonna scroll past you a little bit just because we're running out of time here fast. This has been a lot of good conversations and stuff tonight, and we've enjoyed it, but I wanna make sure we get to some other people who, have sent in some questions a little further down the chat. We'll come back to yours if we have a second. But Brandon says, thoughts on the 5-hour live stream of Avengers Doomsday Chaircast announcement, that will bring back actors from the X-Men like Ian McKellen, James Marsden, Alan Cumming, Kelsey Grammer, Rebecca Romaine, and Patrick Stewart, you forgot to mention as well. Yeah, I thought it was generally pretty dumb way to reveal everything, especially when, like, what, an hour after it ended, they released, like, a 1-minute version.
Yeah.
So so, yeah, they already had that in the bag. So I thought the way they did it was kind of strange. I mean, got people talking, which was smart, but generally kind of a ridiculous plot or a reveal gimmick. But I'm excited to see all these actors back. Now, you know, in the traditional vein of Marvel, and especially with these types of movies, these announcement that these actors are back, I could see these characters all dying in like the first 20 minutes of the movie. A
Yeah.
lot of these the X-Men characters. I hope not. I think Kelsey Grammer, somebody like that will live on. I think there'll be 1 or 2, but, like, an Ian McKellen, is he really gonna be a big part of the entire movie? I hope so. I love that, but I don't know. I'm hoping James Marsden also gets to be kind of a bigger part because he got done
Screwed in
so
those films.
dirty throughout all
Yeah.
3 of those movies, and
Ugh,
I just wanna see him get a proper due as Cyclops. Because Cyclops, for those of you who read X-Men, everybody knows Cyclops is like a top 5 character in X-Men, and he's always such an interesting character, and that especially as you get into some of the later stuff, he does some really strange different stuff. So I would love to see Cyclops actually get his due. Uh, I'm happy we're getting the rest of them. Alan Cumming is another good one too, where, like, I hope they don't kill him off in 5 seconds.
yeah,
But yeah, I'm excited for Doomsday. I'm still far more excited for Secret Wars just because I just don't I'm still the jury's still out for me on Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom. It's just not I think it's something interesting to subvert people's expectations, but I'm just still not sold on it. Doom's one of my favorite comic villains ever, and I just really want that character to be done right, and not just done right because I think Robert Downey will do a good job in the role for these movies, but I don't want him to just appear in Doomsday, die in Secret Wars, and then be gone forever. Like, this
yeah,
character needs to be
yeah,
reoccurring, he needs to keep coming back, and so I'm just a little worried that with the Robert Downey Jr. announcement, I don't see him coming back past Secret Wars. Is this an alternate dimension Doom, and do they have a Doom for the foreseeable future? Because if I love how they finished the announcement with Reed Richards and Doctor Doom as the last 2 names. Will if the Fantastic Four truly are such a huge part of the future of Marvel, you've gotta have a Doom there as well. So, we'll see how it goes. So I'm just generally trepidatious about the overall direction of these movies with Doctor Doom as the main foil, but excited for the people they announced. Also, another sneaky announcement that I really loved was Tom Hiddleston. And you might be thinking, oh, well, Loki's been in all these things. Why? Because Loki's season 2, I just feel like has flown under so much has flown under the radar. Like it's just nobody talks about it. It was really good. Loki as a show, to me, is their best show they've made. I think it's a really solid show all the way through. And I really like what they did with Loki at the end of the show, and I would love to see Loki get a bigger role. I would love to see Loki get a bigger role throughout this entire initiative and just like see him continue to have something that's like fairly interesting moving forward, and whether he is brought in as like an element man replacement that helps give Doom power, if he is one of the like people that Doom goes after first and causes all these just different time warps and the different multiverses to be colliding. Because I imagine if you're doing Secret Wars, you're going to have to do everything's colliding, and we're going from multiverse to one universe. And the Toby Maguires and the Hugh Jackmans and the Patrick Stewart's, everybody's going to end up in one place because it's the destruction of the multiverse, right? That's what the Secret Wars, the new version of Secret Wars was. So we're going to have to do that, and I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I think it's pretty interesting that all these cameos are in Doomsday and not in Secret Wars, because I expected a lot of these people in Secret Wars. I did not expect them for Doomsday. So hopefully they don't die immediately, and hopefully some of the people who didn't get as much time to shine previously, like Kelsey Grammer, James Marsden, Alan Cumming, they get a time to shine here in this version.
yeah, and I have a sneaking suspicion that that is kind of the point, that while all these guys have had great movies or great performances, will kinda be knocked out, like, all the heavyweights that you assume will be knocked out from that Fox series, and then we'll have Marsden hopefully get to be, like, a proper Cyclops to me, my X-Men, like, I need to see
Yeah.
him use, like, his eyes as, like, a laser crashing down. I need to see him do, like, the Capcom dap that's always looks so clean on the cover. He had no swagger in those films. No swagger. It was terrible, right? And it was like the most he ever had was probably like Days of Future Past ending. And it's like, okay, like that was nice, that was cool, but is that really what would satisfy me? Versus, obviously Xavier gets great appearances and everything. If anything, Multiverse of Madness, like as cool as that scene is, it's a bit underwhelming. You're like, "Dang, okay, everything else has been great for him so far." Right? I and this might be controversial, but I don't think Ian McKellen's he's got great lines. I don't love that his arc, for some reason, and this applies to, not what's his name? Who's the
Fassbender.
younger Fassbender, right? It seems like
Yeah.
he always gets a repeating arc, which he doesn't really get in the comics. It's like every film, he repeats the same thing again and again and again. It's only X2 that feels a little different. X3, you're like, "What are you doing?" Right? Like, I don't know. It just yeah, I'd like to see team ups and all that. I love to see them work together, but I don't see them with their age and just how many characters there are, like, being pushed ahead. It's a good time to push the ones that didn't get their due. In the same way that, like, Deadpool was like a love letter to close out the Fox era, like, actually give them their due, just like how Garfield got his due finally, No Way Home, kinda saving Zendaya's MJ, right? The way that he wished he coulda saved Stone's, Gwen Stacy and stuff like that. Like, that's how you should do it. It should be meta in that way, right? Be aware of, like, the limitations of the Fox universe, right? Of course, you have to bring back my favorite character, Will.I.am, but, you know, no, I'm just joking. We'll see how that all goes. But I do expect, like, especially with the end of the video being like, "Oh, there's more than we haven't revealed." I'm sure we're gonna get all the 3 Spider-Man in Secret Wars. There's no way we don't. It's gonna be like we're gonna minnow down a little bit more and more of, like, those extra characters, really, those legacy characters, and the ones that survive will have great dynamics with the other legacy characters, and then 1 or 2, like, we're gonna get James Marsden with Rocket Raccoon. We just have to continue that meta-ness of, like, him with a animated character in a car. Like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. So, I expect him to survive. I expect those sort of characters like Alan Cummings, Nightcrawler, and all that, like, I expect those characters. The ones that have gotten their service, they're due already, and don't need more besides Jackman's Wolverine, I think they're gonna be either eliminated, like, killed off, or just been like, "Okay, your job is done right now. You're sequestered in the void of Sentry," or something like that. Something like that will happen.
Yeah, I imagine most of the X-Men will all get killed off by the end of Secret Wars, just because we're gonna have to make way for the new X-Men here coming in
Yeah,
the future. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you in terms of like Ian McKellen is not given nearly as much juicy material as Fassbender is, and so I'd love to see him get a little bit more. I love what he had to do in Days of Future Past and stuff too, but I would love to see him get more. But yeah, I would love it if like if they did kind of a Doomsday has all the OG X-Men characters. Because they didn't announce Halle Berry, who's another one like Storm's kind of underserved in those movies as well. Could have announced her. Um, but if you had the OG X-Men in Doomsday and then you bring back the other X-Men cast in Secret Wars, because really if they are doing a true Secret Wars, everything is going to collide and everything is going to be a part of the story. So whether it's Venom showing up or Morbius. Like I would love Morbius to show up in one of them just to make fun of it, or Madam Web. Just all these types of things that could be really fun and subversive, and like you said, meta. I just think they should really go for it, and I mean, and they
yeah,
will. They're gonna have to. They're gonna have everybody in these movies just to sell more tickets because people are already talking about how crazy it is. But yeah, I'm definitely surprised this group is in this set of this movie. I really did expect most of these people just in Secret Wars, so it'll be intriguing. And the fact that they really didn't have like any major mainstays of Marvel in Doomsday besides Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston makes me wonder, okay, like what is the direction of this Doomsday movie? Because Doomsday is one of the few, or out of the two, it's the one we don't really know what story they're pulling from. It can be a bunch of different stories. And how does Doomsday connect with what all the stuff we see Doom do before Secret Wars? Uh, if we're assuming it's mostly a version of the new Secret Wars instead of the old Secret Wars. So yeah, it could be real interesting. I can't wait to see it. But yeah, we're running out of time fast here on tonight's stream. I think we'll answer. I'll bring in one more person who's commented a few times here at the bottom, and then everybody else, especially our mainstay viewers, please bring your questions next week, because we would love to answer them. Just had a lot of stuff to talk about this week, and some more news, and a lot of good discussions we've had this week. But thank you guys all for showing up. And again, this is your last call for super chats too. If you want to send in a super chat, make sure you do so. It will get on tonight's show. If not, we will run down here. But Anthony, YouTube fan, says, "Hello, gentlemen. I just purchased the High Republic Into the Light today and started reading it immediately. Liking, loving it so far. With the damage occurring, where's the Bindu?" And then says, "I next intend to buy the High Republic Adventures 2025 annual Edge of Balance Premonition and the paperback book of Echoes of Fear, then the book version of Battle of Jakku Insurgency Rising." Well, I'm glad you're picking up all those things physically as well. I haven't gotten to start Into the Light yet, but I'm very much so looking forward to it. I will be getting it tomorrow so I can get going on that, but we'll have a review out for it as soon as possible. We don't get review copies for the Disney Press versions, the Lucasfilm Press, Disney published stuff, but we do get them via the Penguin Random House group. So that's why we don't always have early reviews out for these young adult books, but hopefully we'll have a review out for you guys in the next week or so for this one, and I'm hoping it's as good as the last one.
Yeah, I've seen some initial comments, and people are loving it, so I don't know if it's gonna match Temptation because that was really great, and George Mann, again, has been the MVP, but, hey, it's time for Claudia Gray to come out of her slumber. It's been a quiet couple years for her. I'm hoping this is the start of it, and then we get some new massive Star Wars novel from her. It's unfortunate I mean, if she does Masters of Evil, I'd love that too, especially because before they scrubbed the Del Rey site is also November 11th, so that and Path of the Lightsaber would've been great, like 1-2 punch that day, like, I would've just that would've been my day, but yeah, no, I'm excited, we're really finally reaching the end. It's crazy, it's crazy, and we know maybe we'll return back to those books, we'll do, like, a couple live streams talking about Phase 1, do, like, a read along or something. Because again, the biggest thing has always been, like, the cross-cutting of the different mediums of the High Republic, that's always kinda felt like a detriment, especially in Phase 1, and then Phase 2, you're like, "Why did we go back 150 years?" Even if the stories were actually quite good by the end there, and then Phase 3, you're like, "Oh, man, this feels like it's going somewhere, but it's just so spaced out that you can't feel that momentum behind it." So, it'll be very interesting just to read them as stories and all together, right? If it works better, if it doesn't work better. But, yeah, maybe one day in the future that, when we're getting a little bit of nostalgia in, like, 5 years or something for the books, then we might do that, pick it up there, and maybe
Mhm.
there's gonna be connections into Acolyte and beyond Acolyte into Plagueis or something that'll further enrich the need to read those books even more.
Well, that's going to wrap up our stream tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the last 2 hours and 15 minutes. We had a lot of fun talking with all you guys about Star Wars. Make sure you join us again next week, which will probably be our last like slow week of news before everything starts coming to a head here with Star Wars Celebration. I guess we might have about 2 more weeks of slow news, but then we'll be covering Star Wars Celebration. So make sure you join us for that. Keep a lookout for all the latest stuff coming out on our channel, including new videos, shorts Monday, Wednesday, Friday, polls twice a day, every day. And of course, the one you guys were asking about last week was the timeline. It is done. It is done. It will be coming out here momentarily. And then also, if you guys haven't noticed, if on the video side, we have been clipping a lot of stuff here from lives, a lot of the questions you guys ask, and showing you guys on the lives and giving you credit on the lives. I mean, on the videos. So if you want to come up with the next question that could be featured on a video, keep bringing these questions and these comments and coming back to our lives and joining us and talking Star Wars every single week because we really enjoy that. So bring those questions. Give us anything you'd like to ask here, and join us again next Tuesday for the next Star Wars live stream. Thank you so much for watching tonight's stream, everybody, and we will see you all next week.